views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Pursuant to Chapter 4, Section 85 of the New York City Charter, a meeting of the Bronx Borough Service Cabinet meeting will take place today, Wednesday, January 11th, 2018, at 9:15 at 198 East 161st Street, 10th floor conference room. Before we begin the meeting, I want to say Happy New Year to everyone, and to answer all of the folks who may not recognize me right offhand. My name is Marika Scott McFadden, and I am the brand new Deputy Bronx Borough President. Thank you so much. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm excited to start the position, and I'm excited for a very productive 2018, working with all of you in the room. And we have 4 presentations today, and they're going to be very topical for issues that we've gone through in the past few weeks, including snow removal, and I just want to welcome all those folks that are going to be presenting today. And so now that everyone knows me, and I've introduced myself officially, I wonder if everyone, including those seated around the table, would then also introduce themselves.
Dirk McCall, Director of External Affairs for the Borough President.
Tom Lucania, Director of Community Boards and Legislative Affairs, Borough President.
Victoria Ring, Director of Policy and Design.
Welcome, Madam Deputy, Community Board's Head.
Welcome, Madam Deputy, Ron Foster-Gato.
Matthew Shuffle, External Affairs Special Assistant.
Good morning, John Sanchez, District Manager, Community Board 6.
George Torres, District Manager, Community Board 5.
Good morning, John Dudley, District Manager, Bronx Community Board number 3.
Congratulations. Very happy for you. My name is Adeline Walker-Santiago. I'm the Chair of Community Board 7.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Kathleen Saunders, Chair of Community Board 4.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Velasquez. I'm the District Director for Councilmember Vanessa Gibson. And congratulations.
Congratulations. I'm Shirley San Andres Alonso, Assistant District Manager, CB9.
Congratulations and welcome. My name is Ken Brown. I'm the District Manager of Ward 5.
Good morning. Tracy McDermott, Director of Community Services, Borough President.
Latonya Walton, Director of Senior Services for Borough President.
Marisol Halpern, I'm the Director of Borough Operations and Constituent Services for the Borough President.
Vanessa Salgado, DOT, Bronx Borough Commissioner's Office.
Good morning, Jackie Carter, New York City Transit Government Committee.
Good morning, Vladimir Rodriguez, Department of Finance, External Affairs.
Good morning, Nicole Jordan, Department of Homeland Services, External Affairs.
Good morning, Kajari Chaudhary, Director from the New York City Commission on Human Rights. Congratulations.
Good morning, Jessica Cruz, Lead Planner for Planning and Development with the Bronx Borough President's Office.
Good morning, Mike Lugo, Director of Field Operations, Division of Preservation at HPD.
Good morning, Mario Ferrigno, Assistant Commissioner for HPD Code Enforcement.
Good morning, Paul Phillips, District Manager, Community Board 4. Congratulations and welcome.
Good morning, Erica Proctor-Sammy, New York City Department of Health.
Good morning, Stephen Uzo, Department of Buildings, Community Affairs.
Good morning, Lieutenant Michael Kozo, FDNY, Fire Safety Education.
Good morning, Adam Lessick, FDNY Community Affairs.
Good morning, FDR Dizoni, TEP Community Affairs.
Good morning, Vincent Graneri, Deputy Chief, Bronx Borough Department of Sanitation.
Sanitation Complaints.
Good morning, Vladimir Rodriguez, New York City Emergency Management and Developmental Affairs. Happy and healthy New Year, everyone. Veronica Munch from Borough President's Office, Community Enforcement.
Thank you all. I think we'll just move directly into our first presentation, which is Vladimir Rodriguez, Bronx Liaison, Board of Outreach, Department of Outreach, External Affairs, New York City, Department of Finance.
Good morning, everyone. Let me take a deep breath. So many people here. My name is Vladimir Rodriguez. I'm from the Department of Finance. I am from the External Affairs Unit. Before I even start, I want to say thank you all. A year ago, before I started working here, I had no clue meetings like this ever took place. I had no idea that community board members were active in our communities. So I'm just very happy and excited to see you all here. And I don't know everyone, but I'm very appreciative because I do live in the Bronx and you guys help tremendously. So thank you. Good morning, Madam Deputy. Today I want to talk real quick. I'll be brief. The Department of Finance has a pretty hefty schedule the next couple of months, and there's a couple of deadlines that everyone should be aware of, so your constituents can be aware of. I'll start by saying around January 15, homeowners received their NOPV, which is their Notice of Property Value. So what this is, this basically tells them the factors that we are considering in calculating their upcoming property taxes for the new year. So this paper that they receive around January 5th details how your property will be assessed, and that's going to directly affect how your property taxes are going to be calculated moving forward January 18 fiscal year. So homeowners have a small window from January 5th to March 15 to dispute their assessed values. So we're going to be hosting, like every year we do, NOPV sessions. We will send out an email to everyone so you can know the dates. I have them here. You can, I couldn't make copies because this is not final yet, but you can take a look at them if you want. We have all the dates up to March. We will be hosting a lot of NOPV sessions all over every borough. And I just, I want to make sure that everyone's aware of what's coming. A lot of homeowners, they see this. Some of them don't pay attention to this paper. Some of them do. And some of them get frantic when they see that their assessed value has gone up. So now is the time from January 5th to March 15th for homeowners to dispute that. In these NOPV sessions, we get about 200 to 300 people. We get all the assessors. People can talk to the assessors directly. And this is the time for you to go on and dispute if you have any questions regarding your property taxes for July. I'm going to be giving this around as well. Now, that's January 16th is the last day for homeowners who want to apply for the senior citizens homeowners exemptions and the disabilities homeowners exemption for the 17-18, meaning we got until January 16. Anybody who applies before that can get a retroactive credit. So we're having a day of action all around the boroughs. That final day, we're having one here thanks to the borough, Bronx Borough President. Thank you to Lucinia Walton and the whole staff. We're going to have one here in the 9th floor. I'm going to pass around some flyers for the day of action. We have many locations. All the borough presidents from every from every borough will be participating. So this is great information. Up front, we also have flyers for our next 6-month event here with the Bronx Borough President, 9th floor, 6 months. We're going to be helping our seniors and people with disabilities, those who are tenants with scree and dree, and those who are homeowners. As far as scree and dree goes, we are not forgetting about scree and dree. I will give out my card. If any of you want to host any enrollment events, we can set up a date, but I do want to make sure you guys understand we have a pretty hefty schedule, so we want to make sure that whatever events we set up, we do everything we can to make them, you know, the best for the people. So we're not going to be doing that many presentations, but more enrollment events. That's what regarding scree and dree. We're trying to get as many people as we can to stay in their communities, and these programs help. When I first came here, I was a bit iffy on this program, but as I started working on it, I seen it has helped a lot of people. So I continue to tell everyone, if you have any scree dree applicants or you have any enrollment events at a library, senior centers, you can always let us know, and we can set something up, we can coordinate, and we can have any of these events. Currently, we're having out both events at the same time, scree and dree and she, he, and the he, meaning homeowners and tenants. That way, we don't exclude anybody. Anything else that I have to say? And that's it. Thank you very much. It was a brief announcement. If you have any questions, please let me know. I am here and I'll answer anything I can. And if I don't, I can always get back to you.
Vladimir, I've been asking for about 2 months for you to come out and address the community board. Can you set that up? Oh, I'm sorry. No, wait.
Now, this is my first meeting.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Brown from Community Board 5. You have a question?
I'm sorry.
So need the mic.
Start over the bang. Sorry. Morning, Vladimir.
Good morning.
Morning, Vladimir.
Good morning, Ken.
So, for the past couple of months, I've been asking if you or someone from your office can come out to address our general meeting of the community board, precisely to talk about programs that you have for homeowners. So can you come out, in addition to the shops that, to the workshops that you're running that you just described, can you come out and address our board?
Absolutely. Let's set something up for February. January, the schedule is packed in, but February is packed a little bit, but let's coordinate.
Okay, thank you.
All right?
Are there any other questions? Matthew Scheffler.
Hi, good morning. The NOPV, is that online as well?
Is that what?
Is it online?
Not yet. Once it's finalized, it will be.
Okay. The assessment for the property values will be online.
Oh no, the owners get this. Yeah, it's all online. All of this is public record. Everyone who gets an NOPV, you can see that online.
Mr. Cruz had a question.
Yes, thank you. My apologies, my voice is a bit hoarse today. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Can we assure our homeowners and our constituents that when now that they are eligible for the senior citizen homeowner because the income limit has increased, that they'll receive some sort of credit, this property tax, the next quarter? I've had folks who come to us for about a year who've been accepted and have not seen their credits as of yet.
Okay, so when something like that happens, your best approach is to contact the Department of Finance. You can do it through online or 311. There have been many cases that people didn't get refunded, but once we find out about it, we send out some emails, it gets corrected.
Information is all with Ms. Feinberg. We just haven't had any answer to it.
Okay.
And it's been about 2 or 3 quarters since they've been accepted to the program.
So what I do want to say is, the last year, the Department of Finance got audited by the Comptroller's Office, and there was many years where people weren't renewing. So because of that, a lot of people got off the program by mistake. There was a lot going on, and some of that has carried over. So everyone's working hard in the Department of Finance. The people who process these applications, they're working hard, but there's only so many of us. So everyone's trying to do what they can and trying to still catch up. I know we're catching up. I believe we're doing well, but hopefully we can get those sorted out.
I think Adeline?
Yes, thank
Ms.
you.
Adeline.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Adeline Walker Santiago, the chair of CB7 in the Bronx. I'm curious, I'm looking at your flyer here for the day of action. It's one day in each borough. So it's 10 to 4, January 16th. Is it by appointment? I mean, how long do you expect? Can we tell the homeowners to be there?
Just show up.
What time period would it take them to get this address? Would it be an hour? Because most homeowners, they have a business or something else going on. So I'm just wondering if there's a procedure when they get there.
Well, when they get there, we will put them with somebody who's gonna help them out with their application, and once they do that, they're on their way. It's just a matter of going there, waiting for a little while. Once you get seen, you speak directly with a Department of Finance representative. They'll help you out getting the enhanced star, senior citizens, whatever exemption you may qualify for. Not only the senior citizens, because we will also help seniors out with getting enrolled in the deed fraud program. You know, there's a lot of fraud going on. We're also helping them get the enhanced star if they qualify with the Department of Finance. If they don't, we'll send them off to the state so they know what to do. But we put them on track to getting all the exemptions that they're eligible for. As soon as they show up, they'll wait their turn. They'll see one of us, and we're on.
Just another part of my question is, if a homeowner is senior and they're 65, they may be difficult for them to get there. Where a family member could come and represent them? And it's an individual session, you're saying. Can somebody in the family come and represent them? They need something in writing, or?
They can, but here's something that everyone must understand, that these applications, all owners must sign it.
Oh.
So unless they have a power of attorney, and they can sign it, that's okay. And they will have maybe a 2 or 3 day flex time to send off the supporting documents, because we do have a fax they can send it off to. But as long as they get to us that application by the 16th, they will be able to get credited to July from last year. So the most important thing is getting in the application before the 16th.
So you have a site that they can do this all on and fax it and everything? If they don't go in person?
We have a fax number we can give you.
All right, so if you can give that to us before you leave, thank you.
Absolutely.
I believe Mr. Dudley had a question.
Yeah, John. Yeah, hi there. Indirectly related to this, is there, because you mentioned that there were certain factors that DOF uses to calculate the assessment, right? Yes. Is there any relationship that you're aware of to the assessed value of a property and the market value? Just a question that I just had.
Well,
offhand, would you know?
Well, okay, so I don't know offhand. That's something I think we need to talk about personally. But I can give you this book because it gives you a whole explanation of how we determine your assessed value and your market value. So this, I have one. You can take that.
Do you have any more?
And also, I know some of you guys do need some of this information. If you do, I'm going to give you my card, and you can always request so we can ship off some of this information, because I can literally put in an order and say, hey, can you ship that off to this office, to that office, to this office. All the constituents need to know about these programs. They work. Sometimes it can be difficult with paperwork, or sometimes it can be difficult with the customer service because everything's not perfect, but for the most part they do work, and I've seen it firsthand, and a lot of you have too.
You scroll down and go into directory of city agents.
We have Larcenia.
Thank you. You can get his cards.
Good morning. I think seniors are a little bit confused because with the STAR program and with the SHE program,
to mail it in, it has to go to New Jersey.
Yes.
So I'm wondering why does that have to go to another state when it's within the 5 boroughs?
So what happens is I get that a lot from seniors. Some seniors have not even applied for the exemption because it says mail to New Jersey, and I've ran into so many of these people in enrollment events where they won't apply for it because it says mail to New Jersey. Now what happens is, as you may know, the city holds bids for who is going to print these jobs, who's going to take these jobs, and that's the company that got the bid in New Jersey. It's beyond my level of experience here, but that's what happened. That's what it is. There's nothing I can do about that.
So you're saying that's just a mailing address, and it should be.
So the mailing address goes to Maplewood, New Jersey. In Maplewood, New Jersey, a company there takes all the application, they scan it in, and they put it in the system. They do this automatically. It's an automatic process that they got going. They also send out mailings, they send out letters. It's a whole workshop basically that does everything. And they're the guys who do it for us, and they're in Maplewood, New Jersey. And sometimes because seniors says send to Maplewood, New Jersey, they automatically say, I'm not sending that there, and they don't do it. And they're losing out on so much money they could be saving. The senior citizens homeowners can give you up to 50% of your property taxes off. This is a huge difference for a senior who's on fixed income. And I've seen it firsthand. Those who lost it last year, that I dealt with many of them, their taxes went, and many of you dealt with them too. They went from $5,000 to $10,000. Some went from $1,500 to $4,000. So this is very important. So as long as you guys know that, even though it goes to Maplewood, New Jersey, it's still going to the Department of Finance. This is what we need to make sure they understand.
So a quick question. So why can't the seniors mail it to your office and you guys mail it to New Jersey?
That's a great question, and that's a question that I will have to ask my supervisors because that's way beyond my title here. But I'll write that down. And
Thank you. We have another question from Victoria.
With regard to the federal tax plan, what did you see on the ground and what did you do to facilitate prepayment? How did that impact your department, the desire of folks to prepay, right? And what did you do to facilitate that?
I don't know enough about that to give you a real answer. I can take this question back with me and I can send you an email and letting you know what exactly has been done. I have not been trained enough for me to talk about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, I have class 2. That's class 1 and that's class 2, but it has the same information. Class 2 is condos, co-ops, rentals, and 4 units.
So moving right
class
along
1 is
on
1,
our
2, 3 family.
agenda,
I can send them to you.
we're going to have another presentation from Nicholas Chicharo. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Okay, well, Chicaro. Oh, wonderful. Community Affairs, New York State Department of Sanitation, and of course he's going to be discussing snow removal.
I'm going to go through a snow presentation. It's sort of a like snow 101. We just had a storm. A lot of people called asking, you know, how come salt trucks are out now? When are the plows going out? A lot of like pretty standard questions that we hope, you know, we can share this information with the community boards and they can disseminate a lot of this information to the community when they call asking about certain things. Before I go into the snow, I just wanted to remind people that as part of the rat mitigation program from the mayor's office, Bronx 4 or 5 have increased. Sorry. Bronx 4 and 5. I don't think this is on though.
It's on.
Oh, it's on. Oh, it records. Okay. Bronx 4 and 5, the whole districts get an extra day of refuse collection, and sections 1 of 6 and 7 get an extra day. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion. People are claiming that they weren't notified. We did email all of the community boards and the elected officials corresponding in those areas back in August, so maybe it was just an out of sight, out of mind. But I did bring for those district managers the flyers for 4, 5, 6, and 7, just so you could take a look at for 4 and 5 it's the whole thing, but for 6 and 7 it's just a portion. We're also sending a mailer to all of the residents within the rat mitigation zone that are getting the extra service, because we noticed a lot of people weren't putting it out that 4th day because I think they just might not have known that it was in effect. So, all right, so I'm going to go quickly through this presentation. We're going to start from here. All right. Oh. Did not work? It'll come back? Okay. All right. Well, okay. Perfect. So our snow budget for this year is $85 million. In November, we went into our night plow operations. Some constituents might call and say, hey, my garbage is picked up later or maybe earlier than usual. We put people on night plows, so they're on, we have collection crews on all shifts in case there's an impending storm or something that comes up, quickly. We don't have to rely on waiting for the majority of staff to come to the garage, because when a snowstorm happens, as you know, time is of the essence. So we have to make sure we at least have enough people to start putting plows on trucks, start getting salt in the salt spreaders. So if constituents call and say, I put my garbage out at 6, they usually come at 7, have them put it out at after 4 p.m. the night before collection. It will get picked up by midnight the day of collection. We try to rotate the sections in which the times change, so it doesn't happen in the same districts every year. So you can let them know of that. We have 3 24-hour weather reporting services. Weather reporting services are very fickle. Like that storm that we just had, nobody had, none of them had predicted more than 8 or 9 inches. And we got 11.5 in Brooklyn. We got 11 in Eastern Queens. So we usually take the more aggressive approach. And you could see from this last storm that we had to do it. Salt spreading, we will begin, the second it starts to snow, we'll begin salt spreading. Some people think it is a little aggressive when it hasn't, when there's just a few little snowflakes coming down and we start spreading. But what happens is, and you could see with this storm, what happens if it's bitter cold. If the salt isn't on the ground, everything on the ground is just going to freeze. We got lucky that we had a little bit of this 30 degrees so far this week, 30 and 40. But over the weekend, the Saturday and Sunday, when it was 1 degrees outside, you see that snow doesn't go anywhere. So if we're not aggressive with putting the salt on the ground early, you can't put it on after the fact. It won't do anything. So we change to 12-hour shifts once we know that the storm is coming. So we make sure we have enough manpower. And each salt spreader can hold about 16 tons of rock salt. We have a lot of salt. Plowing begins when it's about 2 inches. So we don't just have the plows going out when there's nothing on the ground, because there's a lift on the actual plow itself. So if there's not 2 inches on the ground, it's not going to plow anything. The favorite is why are the plows fixed to the right? I'm sure a bunch of people call. Every single year, like clockwork, we get called. Can't you just plow to the left side of the street this year on my block? Can't you just plow over here? People are still surprised somehow after 30 years of living that their driveway is still going to get plowed in. So very simple. From two different aspects. One, logistically, a lot of these routes have multiple lanes or 2 lanes. If you're plowing on the left, you're going to go into the second lane, or you're going to go into oncoming traffic. If you plow to the left when you're making, a lot of these routes are right-hand turns. So if you plow to the left and you're making a right-hand turn, all that goes into the next lane coming the other way. So logistically, it makes sense. Operationally as well, if we have to think about, you know, lifting up the plow for every person's driveway, or this block gets plowed to the left, this plow gets plowed to the right, and at this block you turn it, you have to change and shift, efficiency will decrease dramatically. We want them to get in the truck, we want them to plow the route, and not think about all the other external factors. So this is also very important. The plows operate continuously on their route. So we'll touch on this a little later in terms of 311 calls. So we do not defer or divert the trucks to handle individual complaints while it's still snowing. The plows are going to operate continuously on their route until we tell them it's good enough and we're done with snow clearing operations. So they will get back to that portion of the route. However, we do use that information in terms of situational awareness, which you'll see later, our GPS room, which we're following a lot of the trucks, DOT cameras. We're looking at the 311 complaints. Although we're not going to tell the trucks to go back, we will, if we see, you know, in certain community boards we're getting a ton of these 311s, we are going to coordinate with borough personnel to say, hey, figure out what's going on the ground out there. Sometimes it might be a bus. Like in Queens, we had 3 buses stuck on one block. We kept getting 311 complaints that hadn't been plowed, but at the beginning of the block, there were 3 buses that were stuck on it. So we use that to know. We contact our tow vendors and get them out of there. So it does help us a lot in the process. Snow laborers, once we're done with snow clearing, we put out snow laborers. I believe for the few days that we have them out, we had like a little over 500. We are actively recruiting them. It is difficult to get them to come back a second time, because it's hard labor, you know, to go out there and shovel when it's freezing cold. So we like to have the pool of participants as large as possible. So if you know people, we're still recruiting for the rest of the year. They could just go. They need to go to any sanitation garage, preferably their local garage, because we're going to call you from your neighborhood garage to make it as easy as possible for you to get there. They need 2 little pictures, like passport photos, for their IDs that they make. 2 forms of ID and copies, and they just need to legally be able to work, and that's it. 2 years ago, we bought these haulsters, the smaller trucks, and 40 skid steers for pedestrian infrastructure, buses, crosswalks. Something I like to stress: there are probably hundreds of thousands of crosswalks, bus stops, fire hydrants, miles of bike lanes, everything. It is nearly impossible to get to every single one. It's very, very difficult. We do work hard to try and get as many as we can. But if you're a homeowner or homeowners in the district have a fire hydrant on the corner of their property or a ramp into a crosswalk, if they can clear that as well while they're clearing, it helps us out a lot in trying to make sure that all the crosswalks are safe. We'll skip over that slide, sorry. Here's a picture of some of the snow equipment. We have the spreader, the haulster, which are new, smaller trucks for haulster routes, which are a little bit narrower streets. Large trucks, the front end loader, which we use for snow removal and snow clearing, and the melters and the skid steers. So if you looked at your borough snow plan, you can see specifically the breakdown of equipment as well as personnel assigned to your specific community board. This is just an overall general look at each borough and then the citywide total, so you could see how many the whole borough has. And if you look on the snow plan, which is on our website, you can find how many are assigned to your specific sanitation garage. We added a lot of equipment thanks to after Superstorm Jonas. We noticed that we didn't have enough equipment to handle the smaller pedestrian infrastructure and a lot of the smaller streets. So the mayor gave us $21 million. We bought 80 haulsters, 21 front end loaders, and 40 skid steers, and they were allocated according to how many they deemed Halster routes, which are the narrower streets your borough has or your district has, and we sent them out accordingly. So this is Queens, that's disregard. For salt, like I said before, we are very aggressive with salting, but we also have been trying to figure out other types of material that we can use that might not be so corrosive to the street, or some people say their dogs, it hurts their dogs' paws when they're walking their dogs. We do aggressively try and find a better solution, a more economic and efficient solution. As of right now, salt, in terms of volume, in terms of efficiency, and in terms of economic feasibility, it is the most productive way of keeping the snow from freezing over. So we have about 319,000 tons in 42 salt sites throughout the city. Calcium chloride is just a chemical that they add. So salted is basically works until freezing, and calcium chloride can be effective up to like -10 degrees. So it just makes salt a little bit better. We have a lot of salt, a lot of sand, a lot of chains, and a lot of plows. We don't actually contract vendors for plowing anymore, so if anybody contacts you saying, they wanted to bid on a contract for plowing, we don't do that anymore. In Superstorm Jonas, they were just incapable of handling a big storm, but we do contract with vendors for towing and salt hauling or snow hauling. So getting stuff to a melter or moving it to another site, we do contract for that, but not for plowing itself. So most of you should be familiar with sectoring at this point. A few years ago, last year we implemented it citywide, where sector routes, they're much more condensed, smaller routes. They're just more efficient, less overlap, and they got rid of the marker of a secondary and tertiary street. So it's not tiered that way, it's just primary, which are the critical highways, major thoroughfares, schools, hospitals, uniform agencies, stuff like that, and then there's sector. So there's no differentiation between secondary and tertiary streets anymore. So it makes it so we don't have sort of class battle we had before, where it was like, I'm on a tertiary street and I didn't get plowed, for 12 hours. They're all designed for about 4 or 5 hours to complete the route, and they're all done at the same time. So in Staten Island, when you condense, you could see the routes are very condensed. It actually created efficiencies equivalent to adding 10 spreaders to the borough. So we rolled it out citywide last year, and it's proved to be very successful. This year, we added turn-by-turn navigation into the GPS systems in all trucks. So some people say, that might not be a big deal, but it actually increases efficiency a lot. Some of the personnel come from out of district to handle snow clearing. The routes are pre-programmed in the GPS, and also when you stop, when your 12-hour shift is over and you stop, the next person that gets in your truck knows it pauses where the route was stopped. Previously, sometimes maybe the guy gives the wrong street where he stopped, and it cuts off an extra block that doesn't get plowed until the second time it goes around. Or maybe the guy hops in the truck and starts at the beginning of the route again. This can gets rid of all that, minimizes a lot of the sort of different factors, and if the person goes off the route, it gets them right back on the route. So it makes things much more efficient. Everyone here should know about Plow NYC. It tells you when the last time the plows made it down your block. We have been working with Do It to make the algorithm as efficient as possible. Sometimes, not so much in the Bronx, but a lot of times in Manhattan with the huge buildings, the GPS signal bounces around and it creates a little bit of inefficiencies, but we've got it a lot better, where previously you could see if the GPS mapping swayed a little bit, it might say that you didn't just do 52nd Road, but you did all those side streets as well. But that wasn't the case. You just drove down 52nd Road, and the GPS mapped you a little too over, and it hit the streets. So they had this snap to street algorithm. So if you're on that street, the GPS signal will snap to that street, and it has eliminated a lot of the inefficiencies and the false positives that they call them for plowing. So if you look on there, there are extenuating circumstances where maybe a street doesn't come up properly. You could always check with our office and we'll check with the field, but for the most part, it's accurate. This is just a look at our command center. We're working with a lot of other agencies. We have people in OEM, we have people in NYPD command center. We are working with all other agencies to make sure that we're clearing the snow as quick as possible. So that's just that. So 311, like I said before, if it is a critical area in the district and it is serious, you know, there's a ridge blocking, you know, a lane on Grand Concourse. That is something you would call our office and say we would call upstairs operations and get that handled immediately. If it's like the little old lady up the block said the plow didn't come down, that's something for 311. We're not going to divert the trucks to handle those smaller individual issues on the blocks. And that information that they're not putting in 311 is information that we're not seeing when we're doing our after storm reports, when we're looking at ways we can make things better. It's much easier when it's documented in 311. So please have constituents call 311. It's very valuable information and we use it all the time. During the storm, we're running it like every 15 minutes. We're looking at the complaints, and as they're coming in, it's directing us to make sure we're doing a good job in the field. After the snow ends, I brought flyers up and put them on the table in the front. For homeowners in the district, you know, if it stops, you have X amount of time to clear a pathway in front of your house. There are 3 different classifications. Like if it stops at 8:59 at night, you have to clear within 14 hours. If it stops at 4:59, you have to clear within 5 hours. So there are different rules. We are not actively out there when we're clearing the snow looking for people to give tickets for icy sidewalks, but 2 or 3 days after the storm, enforcement is going to go back out, and when there's dangerous conditions present, people are going to get tickets. And you could also always call 311 for those and put those complaints in for enforcement to look. Okay, so we just went through that. So we'd like to just take a little look at the old emergency snow plan. This was one from 1979, 1980. We get asked a lot. We actually just had some folks from Canada that came in to ask us about our snow clearing operations and sanitation in general, because they actually have 2 separate fleets. It was they were from Ottawa. They have 2 separate fleets, so their garbage and their snow is separate. So they were thinking about doing something like we do, how it's all in one, and try and talk over their expectations that we have in the city. And they told us that some people, you know, they live so far off the beaten path that they're told, like, we'll get to you within a week. Like, just hold up in the house and we'll get to you. I was like, well, we can't do that in New York City. You got 24 hours before people start going crazy. But back in '79, the tertiary streets were 3 to 6 days. You can expect them to be cleared. So after the storm, like Thursday night, we had like 94% of the streets had been salted. Very large percentage had already been plowed and cleared. So we know what's at stake. You know, people got to go to work. Kids got to go to school. We were lucky they canceled school this time. But the economic costs of not having clear streets in New York City is huge, and we know the responsibility, so we take it very seriously. And yeah, that's pretty much our rundown. I know that we did just have a storm, and some people might have some questions, so myself and the Deputy Chief would be happy to answer any questions you might have about snow clearing in general or about this past weekend, and yeah.
Well, thank you. I have a couple of questions myself.
Sure.
So what I thought I heard you say was that, you know, the result of calling 311 is that you're not going to be able to go back to an individual complaint. Can you just elaborate on what what you do with that information once it comes to you. Like
Yes.
when you find out
so
there's an issue.
during a storm, while it's still snowing and we are in the midst of snow clearing operations, 311 switches those complaints for plowing and salting to something called a rapid service request. So what that does is it doesn't come to us as an actionable request. We are not going to divert the trucks to handle individual complaints about their specific blocks because we're in the midst of clearing all the blocks in the city. But we use that information for situational awareness, like I was saying before. If we're getting a ton of complaints in 311 about, they're all coming from Queens East or say from Bronx 10, we're getting a lot of complaints. We're going to coordinate with borough personnel. We're going to coordinate with the deputy chiefs who's responsible for those districts and say, hey, what's going on? Talk to the trucks. We're getting a lot of complaints in Bronx 10. We're going to have field officers monitoring and figure it out. And like we said, maybe there's an extenuating circumstance like I was describing before with the buses being stuck. If we didn't get a lot of 311 complaints about that block, maybe we might not have seen it so quickly, and it would have impeded operations even more. So we do use that information more as a tool to where our focus should be shifted if there is something going on in the district. But we're not going to divert the trucks directly to handle a small complaint, because if we got to go back to one portion of the route, it's going to affect the portion that we should have been driving on to finish. So it would just be really inefficient to do that.
So just to sort of ask the question in a different way, can you define a lot of complaints?
Well, can I define a lot and put a number on it? If we're getting, we're uploading it every 15 minutes or so, the 311 is being refreshed every 10 to 15 minutes. So if you're getting 7, 8, 9, 10 complaints in a 10-minute period, that's a lot. That's when you know, because usually, people know not a lot of people are call 311 in the first place. So if we're seeing, 9 or 10 complaints in that amount of time, we know that's a lot of complaints. There's something going on in the field over there. Or if it's just in comparison to a lot of, because we're looking at it all citywide. So if you start to notice that, we're not getting any complaints from anywhere else, but we got 3, 4, 5 from somewhere else, that might justify looking into seeing what's going on. We are always pretty much working nonstop. Our headquarters personnel, with the borough personnel, with the field personnel, they're always going back and forth to make sure and checking on districts that might be problem districts or districts that are tougher than others. But yeah, it kind of depends on the situation, but 10 or so would be a good amount.
So again, is there any attention in your snow plan given to topography? For example, I got stuck in the snow, but I acknowledge I was going up a hill,
Yeah.
and so is there any attention to that?
Yes,
that's
of course.
paid, that I'll let you answer.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, there's different geographical factors. There's different, in terms of landscape factors that come into play when we're developing the snow plans. If we know streets are narrow, streets are wider, the green streets, there's a bunch of different streetscape stuff going on every single year, and we make sure that when we are training the sanitation officers on these routes, we know exactly which areas might pose more of a risk to drivers and to residents than others. So, yeah, we are aware of those.
I see several hands, and I think I'm gonna be able to call them in order. The first was Mr. Acevedo.
Thank you, Madam Deputy, and thank you, Nicholas, for the presentation. I have a question and I guess a request. The request would be the handout you gave doesn't break down the Bronx districts. It only breaks down Queens. And you referred to...
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did not bring a copy of the snow plan with me, but I can send it to Marisol or somebody that can just email it to the district. Yeah, it's on our website. I believe.
Okay.
I don't remember the tab it's under, but it's on our website. If you search Bronx Borough Snow Plan, you'll see the breakdown.
And I guess my question now is, you started the presentation with the schedule for garbage removal.
Yes.
And we're having in my district in particular, I'm having a lot of residents call that garbage has not been picked up in quite some time.
Yeah, so
my question would be, what's the schedule of once, and I'm sure it's something with manpower, once the snow removal is at a point where you're going back to your normal schedule of picking up garbage, I think it's been like 10 days in my district.
Yeah, there are
Garbage
some
not been
people
picked up,
who
and-
unfortunately got the just hit the perfect wrong timing, where it was wait after Christmas, before the new year, and then they hadn't been picked up yet as of the new year, and then the Wednesday storm came and it delayed their collection even more. Just to give you a picture of what we're doing, like yesterday we had 2,200 collection trucks citywide. We usually have 1,100 collecting garbage. Trying to get back to day, meaning trying to get back to the actual day of the collection. I would say, I couldn't put a perfect day on it, but probably a couple more days till it's like everything is absolutely picked up and everyone could know that the schedule is exactly the day it's on. We did have a lot of backlog, but we're aggressively assigning personnel to make sure there's collections. We are still doing a little bit of snow removal, some pedestrian infrastructure stuff, moving piles, and getting rid of stuff from big intersections. But there's been a huge shift to try and get the garbage as quick as possible. So we have assigned a lot of trucks and a lot of manpower to make sure we're getting back to day to day.
Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you. Mr. Lofton?
Thank you. Good morning.
Why don't you share my microphone?
No, I don't want. Good morning. Talk a little bit about your agency supportive tie-in plans. So we're talking about, we've done the garbage, we've done all the cleanups, we still look at our parks, and our parks are still under duress related to the storm. So what tie-ins do you have with those agencies that cannot effectively create a clearance in our parks, which we know parks can, however, their equipment is not the same as yours.
Yes.
So when do you start to tie into those agencies?
We don't handle any snow removal to mine. No, we don't handle any snow removal for parks. They do assist us in some ways during storms in terms of equipment. Sometimes we borrow equipment from them. But in terms of clearing pathways,
If a request comes forward, then you would not respond to that request.
we do not. The Parks Department is responsible for clearing the snow inside and adjacent to their property.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, thank
Thank you, Nicholas. I have a question about intersections. We, in our district, at substantial pedestrian thoroughfares, at where the sewers are, there was a substantial accumulation of ice over the sewer, which spilled out onto the street and the sidewalk. How should we handle complaints about that? Should we forward that to DSNY? Is that DOT? What would be the schedule and procedure to break up specifically accumulations at sewer grades?
So I'm not sure, Effie, is DEP responsible for maintaining?
Likely.
Because I know usually if there's something related to the sewer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we do encourage homeowners to remove snow around hydrants as well as off basins. I'm not sure if it's a sanitation rule in general to clean off past the curb. How many inches is it? And that includes the basin, but I mean, are you referring to trucks that are dumping it there? How is it accumulating there?
It's ice that's accumulated.
Right.
So I suppose under the snow, it congeals and forms ice, which then expands.
Well, I mean, we clean the basins, so they do become a challenge sometimes if they're full of water and it's all frozen.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, you could definitely send it over to me and we'll send our crews out to check it out. All catch basins are DP's responsibility. I mean, but just in general, we always say, if you're a homeowner, you have a hydrant on your block, if you have a basin on your block, you know, try to remove the snow off of it.
Okay.
So it doesn't accumulate there. I have one in front of my house. I always make sure I remove any debris or snow off of it, just so, you know, it drains. What happens is you have certain days that are milder temperatures, right? So everything starts to melt. But if these basins have, you know, accumulated snow or ice, it's not allowing it to go in.
Right,
and then
right.
you have a whole ponding condition. We end up getting a lot of calls for that.
Yeah.
We send our crews out, so feel free to send it to me.
Thank you. Can I just, sure. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. The call-ins on the days of the snowstorms were really useful, and I really appreciate that. And maybe for the next time, if that could be included in the call-in, what you just described, Effie, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow. A lot of hands right away.
Jeremy?
No. Mr. Warnicki.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. So you mentioned about contracting for hauling and towing. If I have an individual or business that's interested in that, whom do I refer them to?
DCAS handles the contract bidding. So I could send you the link that they have to just go to find out when like the next contract is up or that they are opening for the bid. I'll send that over to you.
Please, thank you.
Mr. Scheffler.
So I have a few questions. Back to what Madam Deputy was saying. Are the hills priority when you're shoveling, or is it based on sectors?
Well, there's really only one priority bracket, I would say. Depending on if those hills are on a critical route, they would be deemed higher priority. Other than that, if they're on a sector route, they're given the same priority as anything else on the sector route.
Okay.
But obviously, you know, we are spreading salt pretty much equally. If it's a huge hill, we'll probably spread a little bit more there and make sure that it's, you know, a little bit safer. But we would obviously suggest drivers advised by winter driving precautions, especially on hills, because it can get dangerous.
Okay, and my last question. I know in this last storm, the mayor had announced that there's snow removal for senior homeowners.
Yeah, so NYC service. There are two ways, potentially. NYC service, if you are a homeowner, if you own the home and you're over 65, you can be put on a list, and NYC service can come out and shovel your driveway or your walkway. Also, city council members can sometimes fund Wildcat or Doe Fund. A lot of those non-for-profits have expanded not just to street cleaning, but to snow removal. So some of their offices offer, like, if you get on a list, they might be able to get, they might have a cap, like 30, 40 homes or something like that. But you can contact them as well, and they can clear it for them.
So if there's a senior that's 65 or older and they call, it's obviously going to come out after the snow's finished. Is it within the 4 hours, or?
I'm not 100% sure about the timing of their operation, but I would assume it is, you know, rough. It would be somewhat within that time, because they're not going to have them holed up in the house for the whole time. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Torres.
Thank you. So every time it snows, we have an interesting conversation in my office, because I think most of the time the Department of Sanitation does a decent job. Yesterday, I saw the front end loaders clearing out the mounds of snow. But I'm just curious, what is the expectation? Because as you noted in your presentation, everybody shovels their snow either to the corner or into large piles. I live in Co-op City. Co-op City shoves everything out into the street. You guys, again, immediately after the storm, you had your front end loaders and these dump trucks taking the snow elsewhere. Did a wonderful job, but there's still snow piles all over the place. And this is the conversation that, I have with Ursula, which is that you guys are doing a terrible job, but I don't think that that's the city's responsibility. What is the responsibility here, especially when it is as cold as it is, and there are these piles that are going to exist for the next several weeks if it stays, of or around freezing? What should the constituent expect of this Department of Sanitation? Do you clear out those mounds, or is that the responsibility of the homeowner?
That's a great question. On the larger piles, I would say that are on some of the larger boulevards or the larger thoroughfares or the big locations in the district, those are definitely given higher priority in terms of clearing. By some of the popular bus stops, we've seen where that happens. In terms of residential streets, if the deputy chief, I don't think we
our hauling plan is mainly for the commercial strips, clean up around the businesses, making sure people have places to park. We do get into streets with SER as we get our clearing. As you all know, you've probably seen these teams of plows going through, and at that time, when we have SER in effect and people are able to move, we can able to get our equipment down the blocks and remove those piles. But we will get there, especially if you're on an SER strip with street regulations. We will get down that block and clear the snow. As we all know, we've seen these huge teams of plows going down the block with the big trucks. And until then, it's hard to get down the blocks. There's a lot of cars on these smaller blocks, and we don't want to, it's hard to get in between the cars and grab those piles. Okay.
Would this be an instance that you would be helped by a few to a lot of 311 calls? Is that something?
I mean, if there's obviously, like we were saying, if there's a large pile or an issue on a more critical street, that's something we would like you guys to give us directly. If it's more on a residential street, it could help, but like the chief said, for the most part, the snow hauling is limited to the larger commercial streets. If we have snow laborers, we could potentially hit some of those residential ones, but I guess that's not the main focus of the snow hauling.
Victoria, you have a question? I'm sorry.
Thank you for your presentation. First question. There is an issue with the shoveling of subway stairs in this city. Would it be possible to have some sort of coordination? I know that sanitation has laborers who do the shoveling. You've discussed this as part of your presentation, right? Would it be possible to kind of help facilitate that with NYC Transit, who I believe is responsible, right?
The MTA is responsible for the stairs.
Okay, so is there any sort of coordination in place, since you are an agency that specializes in this? This is a need that needs to be filled. Is this? Do you see a possibility of collaboration there?
To be honest, no. In terms of snow clearing from pedestrian infrastructure alone is a huge task. Just from clearing bus stops, crosswalks, and fire hydrants is an enormous task that is too much, not to mention the 6,000 lane miles that we're clearing as well. And it's not, I don't even know if you can have enough people that could clear all of those. For us to take on now coordinating with MTA to making sure that they're doing their part and other agencies are doing their, at some point they have to hold themselves accountable and clear what they're responsible for clearing.
Okay, next question.
Yes, we have a representative from Transit. If you're prepared to speak to this question, we'd love to hear. Just to give you a little, point of rebuttal, if you like.
We don't rebuttal here. Good morning. In regards to, yes, we are responsible for snow removal on our staircases. We also have our customer service number, which is 511. So if you happen to have a subway that you notice that the snow, or the platforms that you notice the snow has not been removed after the snow has stopped, please call 511 and report the location, and we will get right to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Second question. So this chart, can you speak to how these resources are determined for each borough? Because because it is so often an issue that different areas of the city are in fact plowed to differing degrees of good plowing, right? And at different times, right? Can you speak to how what the criteria are for allocating resources to the Bronx?
Yeah, so borough-wide, or city-wide, I should say, any sort of allocation for personnel and equipment is just dependent on there's a minimum threshold level, and then the amount that is deemed efficient for our operations. So we allocate resources depending on some factors they're looking at, but the main factor is what is the level that we need to do the job. So if we don't want to have too many people for not enough equipment, and we don't want to have all this equipment assigned somewhere where we don't have enough personnel to even use it. So we will allocate the resources based on the need first and foremost.
And how do 311 records indicate that the agency is doing overall in the Bronx with regard to clearing snow in the past, say, 2 years?
I will say that we actually, well, for this past storm specifically, because I was just looking at 301 complaints for this past storm, we did not receive an unusually high, I should say for calendar year 17 in general, but we didn't really get much snow earlier on, so in general we did not receive that many complaints. Most of our complaints we got were in Queens East, which is closer to Nassau County. A lot of those have small, really narrow streets with double parking, and it's just logistically it's tough. But in terms of the Bronx, it's been fairly good.
Thank you.
No problem.
Marisol?
I just want to get back to the street cleaning regulations.
Yeah.
What are the factors as to when that goes into effect after a storm? You mentioned that obviously instituting the street cleaning regulations obviously allows you to plow, but we also realize that people are now stuck and they can't necessarily get out. So what's the criteria that's used for that as to when that can be lifted, when that can be...
So when a salt spreader is operating, by law, street cleaning regulation has to be suspended. And then in terms of after the storm, I believe, I think, does the mayor decide? The mayor's office will decide when to put back in SCR. Usually it's a few days after, 2 or 3 days after the storm has stopped. It's been a little bit longer now. We still had it suspended. But there were actually salt spreaders out, at least by Q. I live in Queens West 1. We actually had salt spreaders out salting because there was a lot of, like Ken had described, some water that had gotten up by a catch basin. So they were salting to make sure that didn't freeze over. And we actually we might get some more snow on Friday, so Friday or Saturday.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
The
so
salt spreader law.
if the salt spreader is out, they will suspend it automatically. They have to suspend it. So, yeah,
Thank you.
You see one of those, you know it's suspended.
Thank you.
Any further questions? So I wanna thank the Department of Sanitation for coming in, and at risk of having to eat my words on the next snowfall,
Yes,
I want
hopefully
to
no
thank you
more
for all your efforts, and we, to date, think you're doing a good job.
Can we get your phone number?
If anyone needs my phone number, it's 646.
It's on, so you know it's broadcast.
It's on the thing. It's 646-885-4503. And you can reach us anytime.
Thank you.
Remind them that they're now sharing their number with the word that they do
You want his number?
Already in position here. We have Mario Ferrigno, Assistant Commissioner in Code Enforcement for the New York City Department of Housing and Preservation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. So just wanted to talk briefly about the Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services, which includes the Division of Code Enforcement and several other divisions within HPD. We are the preservation arm of HPD, and Division of Code Enforcement is the traditional code enforcement office where we are responsive to 311 complaints for maintenance conditions in tenant-occupied, privately owned residential buildings. We have a Division of Special Enforcement, which is not a traditional code enforcement. They house programs like our Alternative Enforcement Program, which is responsible for conducting inspections and repairs in, it used to be 200 of the buildings deemed in worse condition. I think that number is now 250 per year. And the big difference between traditional code enforcement and AEP is that the law provides under AEP that we do more than our traditional emergency repair. So for instance, if there are chronic roof leaks and the landlord's not responsive, the law permits us to do system replacements. So instead of continuously patching the ceilings that are damaged from the roof leak, the program will go ahead if necessary and replace the roof. Same is true for other systems, so that's one of the bigger differences with AEP. Special enforcement also includes our Special Enforcement Unit, which was a unit created in, I think it was the end of 2001, to respond to big vacate jobs, mostly fires, where the unit gets out pretty quickly and does assessment of properties. Prior to the establishing of that unit, we found that a lot of the residents would lose their apartments after an event such as a fire. So this unit was created so that we could step in, issue appropriate violations and vacate orders, provide temporary housing through one of the other divisions within HPD, and then make it clear to the landlord that the objective was to make the repair and to return the tenant to their apartment. So that particular unit monitors fires and repairs until completion and until rescinding of the vacate and returning of the tenant. We have a division of maintenance, which is responsible largely this time of the year for emergency repair. Now, HPD is mandated to do repairs for lead paint hazards affecting children under the age of 6. But as a policy, HPD also does repairs for heating plants to provide adequate heat and hot water to these privately owned buildings. Of course, once repairs are done, the owners are billed and if the owners don't pay their bills, a lien is placed on the property. Division of Neighborhood Preservation, which also has an office, shares an office with the Division of Code Enforcement here in the Bronx at 1932 Arthur Avenue, is responsible for doing things such as building surveys, block surveys. They sometimes even work or occasionally mediate difficult situations between tenants and landlords with the overall goal to get conditions corrected, and they're heavily involved in that. And our Housing Litigation Division, which pursues, sues landlords who are non-responsive through comprehensive litigation, in addition to being, HPD is named in every action in housing court that a tenant initiates. E&S, the divisions I just talked about, all work together in many different ways, whether it's a referral to DNP, to code enforcement on something one of their folks observed in the field to get us out to do an inspection expeditiously, or perhaps a straight referral to housing litigation for expedited litigation. There are referrals from code enforcement to neighborhood preservation when there are sometimes situations where our code inspectors are not seeing conditions that perhaps the tenants believe exist. So we asked DMP to go out and do a survey of the building, to speak to the owner, to speak to tenants, to see if we can get to the bottom of the issue. Also, code enforcement makes referrals to housing litigation for comprehensive litigation. So we are a team. Our paths are constantly crossing, and you know, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. As I said, the Code Enforcement and Neighborhood Preservation Office is located at 1932 Arthur Avenue on the 3rd floor. In addition to the staffing that we have for Code Enforcement and Neighborhood Preservation, we have a number of citywide units that are obviously, when necessary, are assigned to perform inspections in the Bronx, as well as the other boroughs. Those units would include a lead paint hazard program. The physical location of the office for our Manhattan Bronx lead paint hazard program is at 94 Broadway in Manhattan, but that office responds to complaints for both Manhattan as well as the Bronx. We have a canine unit for with 2 canines that inspect for bed bugs. That is, again, a citywide unit. We have, as I said earlier, our Special Enforcement Unit, which responds to these emergency vacates citywide. We have a Code Housing Quality Standards Inspections Unit, which for the past several years has been performing inspections for the Section 8, HPD Section 8 clients. Prior to that, the Division of Tenant Resources did their own inspections. But we started as a pilot maybe 7-8 years ago, assisting with inspections, and a few years back took it over full-time, where the inspections are now being done by trained housing code enforcement inspectors. Appropriate violations are being issued to these apartments where clients of our Section 8 subsidy program reside. We also have an emergency response unit that is responsible for late night or late evening, overnight inspections, most commonly when the Office of Emergency Management or the fire department is at a scene of an emergency during off hours, including weekends. We have an emergency response unit that is sometimes called to these occurrences and is available to respond to them and provide assistance, whether it be by issuing a vacate order, issuing violations, contacting owners to, assist and do what's necessary to restore whatever service that might be missing, including, electricity, water supply, or whatever the case may be. In terms of traditional code enforcement, again, as has been said before, tenants who have a problem with any type of maintenance condition should first contact their owner or a responsible party, whether it's the super or the manager. And if there's not a response, and in the case of the weather we've had over the last few weeks, not an immediate response, the next step would be to call 311, which will then forward the complaint immediately to HPD for inspection. Tenants should always take their complaint number, which is provided to them at the end of a call or however they're filing their complaint, because they can refer to it if in fact they need to follow up with HPD or whatever the appropriate agency is. And sometimes even, unfortunately, if the tenants have the need to initiate a tenant action in housing court, having that or those complaint numbers provides the court with information that the tenant has reached out, the tenant has complained, and the responsibility of the owner would have been to be responsive to those complaints. In addition to our website, which is nyc.gov/HPD, where tenants can find complaint history going back 12 months and all open violation information. I encourage all of you and encourage the tenants and owners to familiarize themselves with the website, because in addition to this information regarding the building's violations and complaints, there's information about the various programs that we have, including for owners, for instance, removing violations. The traditional way to remove a violation would be to file what we call a dismissal request, which is comes with a fee. And then we schedule a reinspection, and then we attempt to reinspect open violations. Over the past couple of years, we developed a program which is an alternative that is not come with a cost to the owner, which is a violations reissuance program. And if owners meet eligibility for that program, to make it brief, if eligible, we will reissue violations to a property owner they meet the criteria, and basically what it's doing is it's establishing a new correction date for older violations. These are violations that are at least a year old. Anything under a year old is going to make the property ineligible for the program. And it provides a new correction and certification date, so it allows the owner to certify correction. And then once or if that certification is done, we do outreach to the tenant in the form of a letter letting them know that the owner has certified correction of this violation. If not, get in touch with us and we'll come out and inspect to make sure. And if the owner certifies and didn't correct, then they would be falsely certified and would result in potential litigation against them. There's also a telephone number available to tenants, which is our TIMS line, Tenant Information Messaging System. Now, this is not a line that is manned by anyone. However, we retrieve calls numerous times a day. I have one person, in addition to her other responsibilities, is checking this line 6, 7, 8 times a day and returning calls. The telephone number for TIMS is 212-863-8307. This is a line where a tenant could ask us about the status of their complaint or the status of a violation, or for a suggestion on what their potential next step might be. I have to say, one of the common reasons why tenant calls it, and it's welcome to us, is to cancel complaints, whereas they made a complaint and the owner stepped in and took care of whatever the situation was, and they called us that line. I would say probably out of every 3 calls to that line is cancellation of a complaint. And it's good for a couple of reasons, right? One, the tenant got their service, which is great. Second, it stops me from dispatching an inspector to somewhere where they're not needed any longer. So that's also a good place to leave us that message. As I said, that line is checked, multiple times a day, and on some days by multiple people. The heating requirements. As many of you know, as all of you know, we've had some really horrific cold temperatures over the last couple of weeks, and we have received a good number of heat and hot water complaints. I want to first start with the requirement. So the heat season began on October 1st and will run through the end of May. And the law requires that during the daytime, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., when the outside temperature falls below 55 degrees, which is every day, the room temperature must be at least 68 degrees. Okay? Now, in prior years, what I'm about to tell you was not the case. We had a significant change, in my mind, significant change to the law, which became effective this year. Okay? And that is that the nighttime temperature, which is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. the following morning, the room temperature must be at least 62 degrees, regardless of the outside temperature. And there are two significant changes there. In prior years, the requirement was it had to be below 40 degrees outside. So if, for instance, it was 40 degrees outside, my inspectors couldn't write a heat violation no matter how cold it was in your apartment. Okay? So we eliminated that. There's no minimum temperature after 10 p.m. And then if it was below 40 degrees, the requirement was to provide at least 55 degrees in the room. So there was a 7-degree increase in the required temperature, as well as the elimination of a minimum temperature requirement. Both, in my opinion, were very good changes. This heat season, and these numbers are through the 8th, which was Monday. Citywide, we have received, and these are just heat and hot water complaints, 127,892 heat and hot water complaints. I don't have a breakdown by community board, but we have received 39,455 complaints in the borough of the Bronx. We have completed, or attempted, I should say, 48,537 inspections, heat and hot water related. Now, you might ask, with that many complaints, why the number of inspections? So, and I should have mentioned, when we receive a heat complaint, okay, we are almost immediately, okay, doing outreach to the owners. Okay, we don't assume that the tenant is notifying the owner. We don't want to take the chance. The owner is the responsible party, is the one who can get it done quicker than we can through our emergency repair program. So we are calling the owners immediately, and I'm talking about within hours. And during this cold snap, we have, increased our staffing. Anybody available to do callbacks is doing callbacks. We have a staff of folks at Neighborhood Preservation who normally don't do callbacks. They're doing calls on buildings that we're receiving a large number of complaints from. Usually, a large number of complaints, unless it's from one tenant who calls several times a day. If we're getting complaints from multiple tenants, a large number of tenants in a large building, that's escalated to Neighborhood Preservation, contacting them, and then coming back to us and saying, we've spoken to the tenants, the heat was restored, or we've spoken to the tenants and it's still a problem, which would escalate our response to a building of that size. So these calls are part of our normal procedure, but given the recent temperatures, we have increased staffing to staff who don't normally make calls, who have been trained to do it, but we don't normally have the need to use them for the calls. So we have done that. In addition, we have had been running overtime for all inspectors across the board, 7 days a week, to get out and respond to these complaints. In terms of violations reported citywide, and this is for both heat and hot water, so far 5,016, okay, and which is not a big number, which we're thankful for, right? And it means what, right? Maybe the landlord stepped in and took care of it. Maybe the problem wasn't as bad as as the tenant might have thought. So who knows what the reason is, but those are the number of violations reported, and that also includes, and frankly, probably the majority of them are for inadequate hot heat, right? Whereas, you know, the heat might have been 60 degrees or 63 degrees or 64, anything below, you know, the 68, and sometimes 66, 67, which is borderline, will go to another apartment. If it's above that, we might not issue a violation, but anything, you know, below that is going to get a violation. So that number includes, and it does not mean to suggest that these are 5,000 cases where the building was like completely without any type of heat, with a boiler that was, you know, completely down. I think that's it for me. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of questions about the heat. I will add also, I'm sorry, that for questions concerning or concerns about maintenance violations, particularly heat or any other maintenance violation, sometimes, and I know some of you have reached out to me, John has reached out to me for many years, he knows how responsive we are. I always encourage y'all to contact our Government Relations Office. I'll provide you with their number, which is 212-863-8968. It's not because I don't want to talk to you, but sometimes the issue at hand is not really an issue that needs to be addressed to me. As I said, many of our divisions in enforcement and neighborhood services, you know, cross over into each other's worlds. And for instance, if once code enforcement issues a heat violation that will result in a potential emergency repair, that emergency repair and that violation is forwarded on to our division of maintenance, and their staff are going out to scope the necessary repair, hiring the contractor, and ensuring that the heat is restored. So by contacting our Government Relations Office, they're going to outreach to all of us. We're all going to give our 2 cents, and you get one comprehensive answer instead of, you know, getting 6 or 7 different answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for, that was a lot of information.
Thank you.
Specifically to heat complaints, which I'm pretty sure most of the questions will be related to. The volume of calls coming from a particular building, how does that affect your response? Does that make that issue more urgent? Right. Is there a priorities?
So normally complaints are routed in the order they're received, right? As I said earlier, neighborhood preservation is looking at complaints, and we don't do this, you know, regularly. This is during this most recent really cold stretch, which I don't think we've experienced for a while in the city, where it's been this cold for this long. You know, neighborhood preservation has been looking at buildings with large number of complaints. And I'm comfortable in saying that we are expediting calls to those buildings, both the owner and the tenants, and expediting inspections to the best, you know, ability that we have.
I'm concerned about time frame.
Mm-hmm.
For like you just said, we haven't had a cold snap like we've had recently in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, if I have I do all the right things, I call all the right people, I've contacted my landlord, what's the window until I have heat?
Well, over the past several years, I haven't seen numbers for January. Over the past several years, our response time is about 3 days on heat. Now, we've used I haven't seen a number for January yet. You know, in the middle of, you know, this freeze, we had snow, which impacts everyone. I haven't seen numbers for January yet, but like I said earlier, we have used every resource available to us with a lot of overtime, a lot of extended hours, bringing inspectors in on their off days to address these complaints as fast as humanly possible.
I think I saw Mr. Dudley's hand for a question.
Yeah, how you doing? Yeah, I want to thank you, Commissioner. You've always been there every time I've reached out to you. Just a quick question, though. I know you mentioned as part of the protocol, you contact the owner, then 311, then it's routed to an HPD inspector. Is there regular inspectors through the Office of Code Enforcement? Because I know you mentioned about the Code Enforcement emergency response unit that addresses off hours and weekend issues. Is there a separate hours that the emergency response unit inspectors work as opposed to those traditional inspectors through code enforcement?
Yes. Yeah. So our staff, the majority of our staff are working 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So we operate normally on 3 tours. Tour 1 is a Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30. Tours 3 and 4 are 4 10-hour days with every other weekends, because we're running seven days a week. And they're 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. during the weekdays and 8 to 6:30 on the weekend. Beyond that, we have some of the emergency response teams that have staggering hours where they're starting at 9 or 10. But the emergency response inspectors are working late. I think now it's 4 p.m. until 10 hours later, whatever 10 hours later is. And then their relief comes in before they leave. I think there's an overlap until about 9:30 in the morning. So we do have inspectors out there overnight. Now, traditionally, right, they're there for these emergency situations, these fires, these DOB building collapse scenarios.
Vacate orders of fires, anything.
Yeah,
okay.
But and understand, you know, tenants can call and complain about late night heat, right? And we will make our best effort to hit those inspections within the time frame they want us to. One of the difficulties with the B team, which is the later tour, is getting access to someone's house at 2 or 3 in the morning, particularly when they're calling in complaints anonymously, right? If I knock on your door at 3 in the morning, you might not be happy.
Yeah, no. I might not be happy.
But we're doing the very best that we can. But yes, those are our hours. They have been for some time.
Well, just a follow-up question on that. When it's an emergency issue, because a lot of heat and hot water complaints lend itself to the fact that there may be no oil, there could be a problem with the burner. How does, because I know you have an emergency repair program, right? So that addresses most of those issues. What is the trigger at what point? In other words,
the trigger for any emergency repair is a violation.
Is a violation.
Is a violation by code. In a situation, and if any of you have that situation where you know a building is down, meaning the boiler is off, you know, especially obviously during the winter, you know, please call our government relations office. You know, we're out there. We can't be at every building all the time. That's something where you definitely want to escalate it, do some outreach to our government relations office. You'll get, you know, buildings that have heat where the boiler is operational and there's heat but it's not adequate, that's one thing. A building that's down, that's a different story, and it gets a much more elevated response.
So once the notice of violation would be issued in that case, because I know you got the
administration. John, in over the past like 2 weeks, in a situation like that, emergency repair is probably going to be with us. You know, it's not going to be like a day later. In a situation where we've had weather like we've had recently, emergency repair is either going to be with us or they're around the corner.
It's not going to be the administrative code timeline before emergency repair comes.
Not with buildings that are down with temperatures below zero.
No. Thank you.
Not if we can help it.
I hope so.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm not going to ask a question about heat. The tenant support unit, if I recall correctly, in the Jerome Avenue rezoning EIS, there was verbiage that said that there would be a tenant support unit office in our community district. If I heard you correctly in your presentation, you said that there's one tenant support unit for the borough at Arthur Avenue. What does that mean?
I apologize for interrupting, but I don't wasn't speaking of the tenant support unit, and I'm really not familiar with it. I was referring to our Division of Neighborhood Preservation, which is one of our citywide initiatives, and I was just highlighting that the folks from Neighborhood Preservation that go to Manhattan and the Bronx buildings are housed in our code enforcement office, you know, in another section of that floor at 1932 Arthur Avenue, but no.
And then the second question was, there was an incident in our district where there was a fire. HBD the next day or something like that came in, certified that the units were habitable. Family went in, sent me photos of their apartment where the ceiling was on the floor. Is there an expedited process to have the inspectors come back under those conditions, or is it just 311?
311 is always an answer, but if we responded to a fire, then our special enforcement unit, which is part of a different division, but someone I can put you in touch with, okay, opens a case, okay? Now, there's a big difference between, right, habitability and a ceiling being down. If the ceiling is hanging and it's a danger, you know, that's definitely a Class C emergency repair generating violation and needs a pretty expedited response because we don't want it falling on someone. If the fire department or the owner pull the ceiling down, it's still a Class C violation, but it's not nearly as dangerous because there's no danger of anything falling on top of the tenant. And those are things that will be followed up with by the special enforcement unit team.
Okay, good. Ms. Adeline?
Hi. I wanted to ask a question. I was waiting for the fire department to ask this question, but I think it's probably correlated to both divisions. Do you find there's a correlation with looking at the complaints you get citywide with heat problems? Is there a correlation between that number going up and the number of fires that we're getting here in the Bronx? Because I'm wondering if because people are cold and the heat complaints is that's why they're having the stoves on and heaters on. Is there been any study to find out if there's a correlation between that and the fires we've been having, particularly in our closer districts?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. It's not. I don't think something that HPD.
Can you do something to look into that because that's serious?
I'm probably fire cause is probably better determined by the fire department.
Okay.
And they may be able to shed some light on that, but it's not something that we don't know what the cause of the fire is until we hear from the appropriate agency.
I know you don't know the cause, but I'm just wondering if there's any correlation between the fact that this building didn't have enough heat or they had a lot of complaints. Is that a reason that fires took place in these buildings? And if anybody's following that up together as an agency, Subby Fire Department totally.
Good morning. So the fire department is tracking causes and incidents across the board. When it comes to overall data, I mean, we are observing and analyzing exactly how incidents do play to determine exactly working with city agencies or other city agencies to best address either through education or through operational procedures in terms of inspections. But in terms of like correlations between no heat and the spike in fires, I mean, pretty much it is fire season right now, and due to the cold weathers, a lot of bad practices do happen in residential units as a result of it. So, our common practice in the department from an education standpoint is to promote fire safety within the residential units. But in terms of the correlation and what we're looking, definitely that's something that we could check with operations and I could circle back on. So.
Thank you, because I think that's a big issue we need to look at from both angles. It could be a big, if you both combine, I think forces, I think we'd have alleviation of a lot of problems like that. The other thing is in the apartment, sometimes you have one room that's very warm and you'll have another room that's on the other side of the building, and for some reason I find a lot of tenants on that side of the building are moving to another room because that room is so cold. It's got something to do with the building and the bricks.
Sometimes it's the windows, sometimes it's the way the wind is blowing and hitting the room. Our inspectors are going to ask the tenant on inspection for heat, which is the coldest living room. So the tenant should certainly take us to that room. Sometimes
Oh,
it's
you
a
go to the coldest one.
right. We
Okay.
don't go to the bathroom. We
I
don't
got it.
to go to. We don't write violations for the public hall. It's not living space. But the coldest living room, the tenant should always be, and the inspector will ask, which is the coldest room. Now, air conditioners is a hot topic, and sometimes the coldest room is a room that has an air conditioner in it that's not properly covered, where there's an obvious draft. So in those cases, the inspector will not likely write a violation for that particular room. Tenant should consider either putting a proper cover on that air conditioner or removing it for the winter. But in general, the inspector is going to ask the tenant which is the coldest living room.
Thank you.
I may have missed this, but if the 301 complaint is submitted because of a heat issue in a building, HPD reaches out to the owner, and the owner promises to address this, and it's not done, then is it the owner's, the tenant's responsibility to call 311 again, and then there's another
No.
3-day window? Or?
No, that one call is sufficient. Okay, the reason why we're calling the owner, and as quickly as we are, is, as I said earlier, they're the responsible party, and they can make it happen if they want to faster than we can. So we're just checking with them, making sure they know about the complaint. Okay, we're going to then go back to the tenant, okay, and ask the tenant, was this taken care of? Now, if the answer is no, or if we don't get in touch with the tenant, we get voicemail, whatever, that's going out for inspection. The only way that complaint gets closed is if the tenant tells us it was taken care of.
Okay, Mr. I think Matthew had a question first. Yeah, sorry.
So you had mentioned there was 139,000 complaints this year so far?
Total citywide, 120, almost 128,000.
And out of the 128, it was 40,000, almost 40,000 for the Bronx alone.
Yeah, 39,445.
Okay.
455, I'm
Now,
sorry.
I know in public housing, they have their own hotline for the heat, but I'm pretty sure the residents also go 311. Do you keep track of?
Those complaints go directly to NYCHA.
Okay. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I live in 1575, which is a NYCHA building, but is actually an annex.
If 311 will send the call, if it's NYCHA owned, right, does not come to us. It shouldn't come to us. And it usually 99.99% of the time it doesn't.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Marisol?
So, I think John tried to ask the question before. How many inspectors have been allotted to that Bronx office, separate and apart from the special units?
Our Bronx office has, I want to say, about 45 to 50 inspectors, probably closer to 45 at this point, where, you know, we're down some head count, maybe 15 to 20. We've had recent retirements. We're always looking for inspectors. Please, if you know anybody who's meets the qualifications, encourage them to go to our website and apply for postings. We've had a bit of a challenge with recruiting inspectors, to be honest. Had last year we had 2 job fairs where we had invited folks to come to our offices at 100 Gold Street. So if there's any way any of you can get the word out that we're looking for qualified candidates, please do. But yes, that number's about 45.
So, I'm sorry, the second question I have is when, as far as access, you alluded to it with the night access.
Right.
But what happens when there's no access to the apartment or even the boilers? Because that
Okay,
becomes
so
another issue too,
let me
when the landlord
separate.
is not cooperating.
Let me separate the access issue for you. For heat complaints, most buildings, the vast majority, have a central heating plant. Okay, so if the boiler is down, everybody's down. So with heat complaints, if John called in a heat complaint and he lives in apartment 3A, okay, and we go knocking on his door, okay, and he's not home, we're going to go to his neighbor, We're going to knock on his neighbor's door, and we're going to, you know, make every effort to get in there and take the temperature, because it should be the same, or right around the same.
So I know that.
Now with maintenance complaints that are apartment specific, okay, if an inspector doesn't get in, and remember, our inspectors all are equipped with phones. They're making phone calls when they get to the building to let the tenant know they're there. But if we don't get into an apartment for an apartment-specific condition, then they're leaving a card asking the tenant to, if they still require an inspection, to call our offices to schedule an appointment.
As it relates to boilers, for instance, I know in the past we've always asked, when is it that HPD, or is there a schedule for the inspection of boilers overall in these buildings?
No, and I'm not sure if the buildings department does, but their boiler inspections are, I don't know if it's considered a self-certification, but I know owners are required to have their boilers inspected every year, and that's handled by the buildings department.
Oh, so I'll ask Bill.
Yeah,
I'll ask
I think
Bill.
it's a better
Because
question.
I just wanted to know what the time frame was at, because
Yeah.
usually the complaints obviously come in the winter.
Right.
And that's when the boilers are failing, but
Right.
I wondered if there was
Yeah.
anything that would have indicated that
Right.
there was a need for repairs
Yeah.
within that.
Yeah, I think it's better questions for buildings. I will say that if we go in and find inadequate heat or hot water, my inspectors are going to try to get into the boiler room. Now, they're not boiler mechanics for the most part, but they're looking for any maybe obvious problem, a leak, you know, something broken, you know, maybe no fuel, you know, because that kind of information is very helpful to our emergency repair people, right? Because there's a big difference between, you know, doing an actual repair where you need, you know, parts versus simply making an oil drop. That's a big difference.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Torres.
Thank you. You said something interesting. I've worked for the city in various agencies for quite some time, and I've always found it difficult to locate building owners because on the official paperwork that they hand to the city doesn't necessarily, they'll have an LLC or they'll have some other things. So do you have a separate list of building owners when you call them directly?
Well, the law requires owners of multiple dwellings to file an annual registration with us. And while I don't know the percentage, I think the compliance is pretty high. So that's the information we rely on.
And that's the public record?
I believe everything but the 24-hour confidential number is available to the public by our website. One of the tabs on the homepage of our website, you can enter the address. And when you do, you'll come to a column on the left that it has a bunch of options, including open violations, litigation status, and also one of them is property registration. I'm not going to swear to it. There is registration information there, including the managing agent, and I think the phone number's there. I'm not positive.
Not in all cases, but.
My experience has been that there are phone numbers. I've worked in the buildings department for quite some time, and there were phone numbers, and they were completely fugazi.
Yeah.
And these were cell phones, so.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of success, you know, with, I mean, most of the other agencies do come to us.
Yeah.
I can't say that we're 100% have the right, accurate information.
I've gone to Mike
Right,
many times.
right.
My other question stems from, we do budget consultations every year. One of the requests from Community Board 12 was for the emergency response team to increase their budget because I'm sure that this is a priority heat, but there's other stuff that comes, demolitions and stuff like that. Do you know if that's ever happened? Did they increase the budget for the emergency response team in case that they have to respond to certain situations like this?
I don't know, but I do know, I don't know if the budget was increased. I'm usually at the budget consultation, so that's where I see you every year. But I do know we have increased the number of teams on the emergency response side. That I do know. I think we did it from within, to be honest, but I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Santiago.
Hi, I just wanted to share your information. It was very thorough, very informative, very good, and I really appreciate it. The thing is that you mentioned when this lady down here asked a question, about the complaint. Yes, you did a very good question, because on Marisol, if you are a tenant that lives in the building that I was talking about, that your side is always cold, and you cannot get to that tenant's apartment, you're knocking on the neighbor's door, that neighbor's apartment is probably burning up.
Well,
So,
again, we're
so
gonna
the question
try,
I'm
we're
just
gonna
gonna
try to
ask-
operate to the extent that we can in the same line, right? So
On
if
the
you're
same
on,
line?
right,
So that's what I was gonna ask you,
Yeah,
is that
to the very
feasible?
best,
Yeah.
we can. We're gonna try to get as close to the, the area as possible. And you're right, sometimes it is strictly an apartment-specific problem, and we should get access to that apartment. And we always do our very best to do that.
The reason I brought it up, is there a specific outline of what a 311 call should include? Like, if you have that kind of specific information, should the tenant say, I want you to go specifically to my apartment or my line? Should I say
Again,
that as a board?
I think that when the calls are made to 311, and maybe you could ask DeWitt for this, but I'm pretty sure they're asking for that type of specific. No, I do, because I see the complaints. And,
Haven't seen
or, I see that there's an option to indicate whether it's building-wide or apartment-specific. And look, I can't sit here and tell you what
Okay, I just wanted to
motivation
know.
is for folks, but a lot of times folks, will put building-wide in the hope that maybe they go to some other apartment.
got you.
But there is an option for apartment, building-wide, and frankly, for conditions that affect buildings in their entirety, 311 takes even anonymous complaints for that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, we have one more question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. Is there any effort made to track over from one year to the next when there have been violations with heat in a building that may be indicative of an old boiler that perhaps HPD could do some sort of loan program to help the landlord with?
I know that HPD has loan programs. I'm not intimately familiar with them. Certainly, if there are questions or if you're aware of any such buildings where owners need this kind of assistance, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to government relations, and they will point in the right direction. But we're always looking at historical information in terms of, buildings with problems. Maybe not so much to figure out whether they need a new boiler or not, maybe more so to see if this is an owner who maybe needs to be a little more interested in his buildings, maybe we need to pay a little more attention to their portfolio, not so much, I don't think, to figure out what's going on with the boiler.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want to add that in my division, neighborhood preservation, we do reach out to landlords periodically all the time. So that land would be on our list, and we'd send them information regarding our loan programs, or we may send our other evaluators out there to conduct a building-wide survey to see the conditions in the building. And that's something that we do in neighborhood preservation. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Yes, last but not least, we have presentation, our final presentation. I'm getting there. Yo, Karina Durante.
Duarte.
I won't be able to. Durante. Yeah, okay.
You can call me Joka for short.
I will. Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, New York City Emergency Management, and Fabricio Cabrera. I apologize in advance for all the names that I butchered today or after the fact. And Director of Community Affairs, New York Fire Department. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us. As you mentioned, my name is Jokarina Duarte, New York City Emergency Management, and I'm here today to talk to you about, what our agency do and what we can do to, work with your offices to ensure that, you're getting information on time, but in addition to that, you know what's happening in your neighborhood. In addition to that, we're doing some emergency preparedness with you to make sure that your residents are prepared for any type of emergency. Our agency is a coordinating agency for all city emergencies. So the best way to describe what we do is, if you see an incident in your district that you think that more than one agency is required to be there, we will be there. We will have someone on the field to make sure that there is a coordination among all the city agencies and the responses that need to be happening at that particular incident. The way it works is either, there's an incident and it made a trigger and we had to send someone on the ground to make sure that all of the other agencies are being responding as well and they're doing what they need to do. Or either the fire department or any other city agency would ask us to go to a particular incident, and that would trigger for us to also respond as well. So we don't respond to everything, even though people think we do, but there are different levels of response that we do. And often we have incidents in which one of you has said, hey, we had an incident in our district, this is happening, do you know what's going on? We don't know about it, and that can be a trigger for us to send someone on the ground to see and observe what's going on. And if it's not us, we will make sure that the right agency is there taking care of the issue. So that's the third different level of responding to incident. We are over 290 employees with different backgrounds. Our agency is very small. And as you may know, we were called Office of Emergency Management when we're Department of Emergency Management. So we are at department status since 2012. So that means that just like any other agency, we're responding and we have more responsibilities towards the community and the city as a whole. My unit, which is Intergovernmental Affairs, was citywide. Our employee right now is growing. However, we're still citywide. We're still responding to inquiries to over 232 elected officials that include the community board. And if you want to add that up citywide, that means that we get inquiries from all over the place and things happening. Sometimes it's things that we're not aware of and we have to kind of dig in and find out what's going on and loop in other agencies, or things that we are responding on the ground. But when you have different incidents happening in different boroughs, it's kind of hard to be able to say, hey, Bronx 1 or 2, you guys are having this incident here, but we also have another 7-alarm fire that we're working with the fire department to kind of send notifications out. So it's interesting because when we do notifications out, we kind of work it out with our partners to see what is the incident and what's going on. For instance, if there's a fatality, that's something that most likely the fire department will be sending notifications on, and you will not get it from us directly. But if it's something that's going on that's multi-agency level, and we know that you're going to be having questions about what DOB is doing with this particular incident or any other agencies involved, most likely we'll message out. And doing incidents like 42nd Street, the pedestrian incident that we have, or any terrorist attack like the one on the subway, we know PD is also very busy in the operation piece of it. So most likely something like that we will coordinate with other agencies like PD to see whether or not they want us to send the initial message out. But any inquiries and question, we most likely would loop you in with PD to make sure that they're giving you the most updated information. We had a winter weather call, which was the one that Ken was actually referring to earlier in the presentation. We host, every time there is an inclement weather, emergency management usually holds a conference call with elected officials citywide, and that includes obviously community board. So we thank all of you who joined the conference call that we had recently. But more importantly, when there is a winter weather and a big emergency, our emergency operations center is activated. The Emergency Operations Center hosts all the city agencies that need it for that particular emergency. They have staff there that are staffing most likely 24/7 until the emergency is over. And then us, Intergovernmental Affairs, will be adapting a different shift in the schedule. So often you will hear us saying, please, if you have any inquiries with any city agencies while we activate it, please send it to us to the Intergovernmental Affairs email address, which I hope all of you have. Because when we're activated, we will be working different shifts, and it could be that you'll be sending me something to me, but I might be actually resting because I just did a 24-hour or 12-hour shift the night before, trying to make sure that we always have coverage to answer your inquiry. So the best way to reach out to us is the Intergovernmental Affairs email that we have shared with you. If you don't have it, I'll be more glad to share individually. But that's the best way because it's a 24/7 email. Some of you have sent me questions at 12 a.m. in the morning, and one of us will be answering that, whoever gets fair. Sometimes you get two answers at the same time from two of the team, but it's the best way to reach out to us and to be able to make sure that we're able to continue getting you the information that is needed. I always say that, although we take very pride on being responsive to city agencies and elected officials and community board, I always say that the best way to know what's happening in your district is by registering or subscribing yourself to Notify NYC, which is the city free emergency alert system. And the reason why I always encourage everyone to join that is free. If you don't have a smartphone, you can just register your landline and it will get an automatic information on what's happening. You can put up to 5 zip codes, and if you want, now we have a new application that it can actually track you where you are. So if you were on 42nd Street where that pedestrian incident happened, you would have gotten a notification saying you are in this area, please avoid that route. And the reason also why we always encourage everyone to subscribe to it, because the way it works is that if something is happening, if there's, 2 alarm fires happening, obviously FDNY is responding, PD will be responding for security the premises. But the first thing that you will get, it will be not a notification for Intergovernmental Affairs, but if you're registered to the Notify NYC application or registered to the service or following us on Twitter, the first thing that you're gonna see is emergency personnel responding to this particular incident. That will be the first one. As per us, Intergovernmental Affairs, we need to wait for our staff to get into the site, make sure that they're coordinating whatever efforts needs to be coordinating, making sure that all the agencies that need to be there is there, and then hold a meeting among their agency that are there to know what each agency is doing. They will send that to our watch command, and our watch command will send a notification to us, and that's what we send you. So it's a little bit of gap between, what the initial response and what we get. So if you get that, most likely, if you get the Notify NYC message and you say, hey, Karina, I know something is happening on this particular block in my district, can you please provide us additional information? I know that the first team before, even watch command get the notes for the person on the scene is, watch command, I need this as soon as possible, please send it to me. Elected officials, community boards are inquiring about this. It's important that we get this notifications out as soon as possible. So that is important, and the reason why we always encourage people to sign up to Notify NYC. You will see that as we're deploying the staff versus us waiting for the staff to send us the information from the field and make sure that you guys are then getting that information towards you. In addition to that, we have our monthly newsletter that we send out. We like to take pride in calling each of your offices to make sure that we always have your updated information, because we do take pride in sending out these notifications out, letting you know what's going on as it's happening. Sometimes we had to wait for information. Sometimes, you will see a delay if there is a power outage, depending if it's overground, cables or underground, it will actually trigger a different response. Sometimes when it's overground, it can be responded within 30 minutes. So by the time someone is responding and they get there, the problem is already resolved. So sometimes we also wait a little bit longer to actually notify you on what's going on. And if you do get a notification for us, feel free to respond to us, say thank you, acknowledge, receive, because like that we know that you actually also keeping track of this notification and this update. So I know that if something is happening at 10 p.m., and there's the next notification that we get from our staff on the field is at 11 o'clock, I'll make sure that I send you that before I go to sleep, and I wait until the next day to get you that. So it's important that you also give us feedback on the information that you get in, and if it's helpful, and often let us know what's happening, because if it's not us, we'll be more than glad to loop you in with the right agency. Again, we're 24/7. You can call us, email us on the weekend, and we will respond to you. And if it's not us, we will be more than glad to connect it to the right agency. But, we like to hear feedbacks from you. We like to know what's going on in your district, and we like to partner up with you to do different initiative, in which Fabrizio is going to talk a little bit more about one of the initiatives that we're going to start piling up in collaboration with the Board of President's Office.
Thank you, Yoka. So on one note, I'll talk about notifications from our end. The FDNY Community Affairs Office has actually been working with OEM throughout the last year in terms of really developing a more coordinated effort to notify community boards, elected offices in terms of fatalities, because as Yokarina mentioned, OEM really does the notifications for anything major alarm. We've taken the responsibility of pretty much providing notifications of anything pretty much that's fatality, or there is fatalities involved, or anything 7 alarm or higher, which we've seen recently within the last couple of weeks. So in terms of notifications, pretty much what we provide is just what's going on in terms of operations and patient count. Due to HIPAA and confidentiality, we can't provide patient information, but we can provide patient totals. But we will try to best connect in terms of other agencies or support groups that do have further information on patient information or even displacement or resident services like the Red Cross. So in terms of what you would receive from us would be an email just making you aware of the type of alarm or the type of fire that is going on, the total number of fatalities, and the total number of patient count, and basically how to bring about fire safety awareness. In addition to our push with notifications, we also dispatch a fire safety team, basically, because it's a dual response. Not only are emergency responders putting out the flame, but at the same time, we want to be proactive or reactive, I would say, in the message of doing something immediate so that people are aware of messaging and safety tips so that the immediate community can help in terms of spreading the word of fire prevention. With that, we provide a separate notification as an update regarding either the cause, if it was determined of the fire, and basically a location, so that you as district managers can share with your communities, and elected offices as well can share with the respective communities of the location of our fire safety team. So with notifications, we do use the current directory that we have. If there are better emails, I have my Bronx Borough liaison here, Adam Lessick. He will be contacting everybody individually in terms of getting the best point of contact, because we do want to provide up-to-date information when it comes to fatal fires or anything above or 7-alarm incidents. In addition, in terms of fire safety education, definitely Adam can be the best person, or you can feel free to contact me as well. During the off hours or in the weekends, the best email to contact, and we have a whole office of borough managers and liaisons that do respond. Best email for us would be communityaffairs@fdny.nyc.gov. So that's the notifications piece. On a more important note, everyone has seen the report, and the Bronx was affected heavily with the tragic fire that did occur in Prospect Avenue, where we lost 13 civilians in that 5-alarm fire that occurred over the holidays. With that said, the month of December was one of the worst in terms of fire deaths in decades that we've had, with over 26 deaths occurring within 1 month. We did see a spike in fire fatalities in comparison to the record low last year, which we had 48. This year we ended with 74, which was with close to a 50% spike. Despite the great work that the Fire Safety Education Unit and the Bureau of Fire Prevention does in terms of code enforcement and inspections, and also safety presentations and getting messaging out, it's basically a lesson learned that at the same time, the fight isn't over, and promoting education isn't over. We have to be creative and innovative in terms of really developing new initiatives and new ways of getting information out there. On behalf of the department, we've been quite creative in terms of now using basically developing a website that provides safety education in real time in multiple languages, in over 80 languages. It's fdnysmart.org. In addition, we've developed a more expansive community affairs unit, which really complements fire safety education in terms of getting out there and building collaborations with different community stakeholders, faith-based organizations, to develop presentations or even different campaigns to get the message of fire safety out. With that said, as Yokarina mentioned, we are working with OEM and the Bronx Borough President's Office to initiate a pilot program as just as an example of the different initiatives that we're ramping up as a result of this spike in fires. With data that we're collecting from our operations and our GIS units, we're basically pinpointing high incident areas that have either high fire deaths or fire injuries, and basically breaking it down by community boards and even blocks to basically to do concentrated outreach. With OEM, what we're going to be doing in terms of this targeted outreach is developing resource fairs in which the emphasis is fire safety preparedness, having our fire safety educators at the forum to provide the messaging, providing CPR life safety training, providing awareness on the career so that people can trust firefighters that are going into the homes as well, and at the same time, levels of emergency preparedness and training from OEM. In addition, the caveat is that we are working with our partners at the Red Cross to have on-hand smoke alarm installations, because we have done a tremendous job with the American Red Cross throughout the last year through our Get Alarm program, where we installed over 100,000 smoke alarms citywide, and especially in the high target or high impact areas. So with that, we are going to be continuing to do those efforts with their Sound Alarm, the initiative. To speak on that, we are actually starting with the Bronx coming this January 14th with support from our FDNY Foundation. We have provided over 7,000 alarms to install throughout this round of events. Sound the Alarm initiative, or the program happening here in the Bronx, will be in the Sound View section for January 14th. I know the Bronx Borough President's office did send out a mass blast requesting volunteers for the Red Cross. Fire safety education is going to be on board, and we have already registered close to 300 residents within that immediate area for alarm installation. So it's a good program, and we're going to continue those efforts down the line. So with OEM, like I mentioned, we are going to be unraveling or unveiling this program potentially within the upcoming months. And like I said, it is going to be targeting all Bronx community boards and seeing which way we can work with district managers to basically develop these resource fairs and identify key areas of where they would be beneficial within the district. So, any questions?
Thank you. Thank you. I was actually wondering, you said there's someone here from fire safety education unit. I was wondering because, as you know, we have a lot of viewers on BronxNet. If there's someone, if you're prepared to speak about some of the ways to stop the spread of fires in terms of like barriers and things like that.
So we actually wanted to invite the lieutenant up here. His name is Lieutenant Michael Kozo. He's with the Fire Safety Education Unit. But what we were going to do today is not only speak on safety tips to prevent fires within households, but at the same time emphasize the fact of what are the major causes of fire, especially within 2017. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Like Fabrizio said, my name is Lieutenant Michael Kozo. With the Fire Safety Education Unit, I want to give you a little background on exactly what we do. A lot of our events and presentations are based on schools. We do a lot of elementary, middle schools. What we'll do is we'll send a team out to the schools, and we do classroom by classroom. We'll hit the grades that were requested at that school. And a couple of weeks later, depending on the weather, we will follow up with a smokehouse, is what we call it. And what that is a mobile trailer. Inside is smoke. We put some, Hollywood smoke inside so that you really can't see. It is dark inside. We have a couple of ways to get out. One door we have is hot to the touch. And basically what we do is we put the students in one end of the trailer, and we have them follow the wall. We teach them to stay low. We teach them to keep their hand on the wall to guide themselves to the exit. We also teach them when they come to one of these doors to feel the door to see if it is hot or if it is not. And then we'll ask them, will you use that door to get out? And teach them. Obviously, if the door is hot, you don't want to use that door. You want to keep going and look for another way out. And this trailer will end eventually with a door, which we will teach them to, again, touch to feel if it's hot. And if they do say it's not hot, we would use this door, then we'll open the door and they'll be able to get out. So we do, like I said, we do the presentation in the classrooms, and then we follow up with this trailer a few weeks later. Now we go to, schools at least 2 to 3 a day. Again, this is all based on people calling us up, the teachers or the principals or the parent coordinator calling us up and scheduling these presentations with us. For the most part, we don't go out reaching out to the schools ourselves. It's all based on people calling us. Along with that, we do presentations everywhere. We do cabinet meetings, we do PTA meetings, senior centers. We'll go everywhere, church groups, everywhere. We go everywhere and do a presentation, but it's all based on people calling or scheduling something through the FDNY Smart website. And scheduling a presentation with us. We also do fairs where we're handing out fire safety literature. So not just presentations, but we do tabling events where we're handing out all of our fire safety literature. We have literature, like Fabrizio said, in 80 different languages on the FDNY Smart website. And we will, based on the demographics of the area that we're going to, bring literature in those languages with us to help out. On another note, in terms of the fatal fire response, we do send a team out immediately to the scene of the fire, and we try to get the cause of the fire as fast as we can from the fire marshals. We work closely with the fire marshals to get the cause of the fire, and we will emphasize those topics while we're there at the on-site. Right now, we are able to hand out several smoke alarms, usually about 50 smoke alarms, combination smoke alarms when we go to a fatal fire. But for the most part, we'll go along with the Red Cross, and we're signing people up for the installations through the Sound the Alarm program. What we were finding out with the handing out of the smoke alarms was a lot of people weren't putting the smoke alarms in. They weren't installing the smoke alarms. Some people were trying to return the smoke alarms to Home Depot to get money back. So it was kind of defeating the purpose. With the installation program, we know that the smoke alarms are in, and that's really the way that we prefer to go about handing out the smoke alarms now. In terms of these recent fires that we've seen, again, we've seen a terrible fire in the Bronx where, again, 13 people passed away. I don't know if anybody heard, but the 13th person did, in fact, pass away. This was started by a 3-year-old child playing with the stove who had a history of playing with the stove. Now, again, there's a lot of things that play play here, but there are things that we talk about when we talk to the kids and when we talk to parents about safety features that you could put on your stoves and in the kitchen and everywhere else, to be honest, in the bathrooms. There are magnets that you could put on the stove so that the child can't open the stove. There are little caps that you could put on the knobs of your stove, on your oven, so that the kids can't turn the oven knobs. So there are a lot of things out there. There are socket protectors that you could put into the sockets on your outlets so the kids don't stick anything into the outlets. There are numerous things that we do talk about these things, but in all honesty, when you're talking about a 3-year-old child, I mean, we're really talking about supervision more than anything else. I mean, this child should have been supervised, number one. Number two, being that there was a history of this child playing with the stove, somebody should have made a report or a phone call to the fire marshals. We do have a juvenile fire setters program, and they should have called them. Once you call this number, it's 718-722-3600. That is the Juvenile Fire Setters Intervention Program.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, 718-722-3600. Yeah, I'm gonna hand this sheet out, and this is gonna have all the information on here.
It's good because it's broadcast and people need to hear the number.
Absolutely. And if you do suspect a child, and now this can go for anybody. This goes for parents, for neighbors, for anybody that suspects a child of being curious with fire, playing with fire. You call this number, and the fire marshals will set up some kind of intervention. They will try to get in contact with the people, with the child, sit down with the child, have a talk with the child, and they do follow up afterwards with this child, depending on what they feel needs to be followed up on. If they feel that this child is a very serious risk in terms of setting fires, they do follow up very closely with the child. Again, there was no record of anybody calling on this child that started this fire in the Bronx. There are a lot of messages that we can, that I can sit here and talk about. Usually our presentations go about an hour to an hour and a half, depending, because there are a lot of things that we talk about in terms of fire safety and fire prevention. But one of the major things that we're trying to get out there right now is keeping the door closed. So obviously we all know in this apartment, what we're hearing from the marshals also was that this tenant did have a history of leaving their door open. So what happened was the door, just to give you a brief background, the door was open in this fire apartment where the 3-year-old child started the fire. This door was very close to the staircase, okay? Once they left their door open, they left. The fire continued to grow, and it eventually got out into the hallway and contaminated the entire building. So as residents were attempting to escape out of their apartments, they were running into this cloud of smoke and gas. Some tenants were opening their doors, seeing what was going on in the hallways, and turned back around, went back into their apartments. Okay, this was a non-fireproof building. Everybody needs to get out of this building in terms of fire. This is also something that we will talk about, the difference between a fireproof building and a non-fireproof building and how to react if there is a fire. Any building over 7 stories is considered a fireproof building. If you do not have fire escapes, that's considered a fireproof building. In a fireproof building, we recommend that everybody stays in their apartment except for the people that have the fire in their apartment. Obviously, if you have a fire in your apartment, you want to get out. Anybody else in the building is safe where they are. All they need to do is maybe throw a little rag or something under your doorway if you do see smoke seeping into your apartment. Other than that, the walls are fire rated for several hours of resistance to fire from spreading from one apartment to the next. When we're talking about a building like this, which is 6 stories, it's a non-fireproof building. The fire will spread from one apartment to the next, from one floor to the next, with no hesitation, with no stop whatsoever. By closing that door when you leave the apartment, if the fire is in your apartment, you are containing that fire tremendously to your apartment. You are enabling everybody else in that building to escape safely. So closing the door can't be emphasized enough. And in all honesty, even if you live in a private house, if you have a fire in your bedroom and you get out and you're able to close the door to that bedroom, that will seriously stop that fire from spreading to the rest of the house. We do have pictures. I didn't bring any pictures with me, but we have pictures of apartment buildings and apartments where the door to the apartment is burnt to a crisp, and once you open that door to the apartment is clean as can be. Okay, so that just shows how much of fire that door is blocking. So closing the door is a tremendous help. One of the other things the fire marshals did tell us was that in this building, a lot of these tenants were unable to escape for several reasons. Number one, the windows to the fire escapes were blocked. Okay, people had furniture in front of the windows leading to the fire escapes. They were unable to get to the fire escape. Several of them had locks on the inside of the fire escape windows. Okay, so if anybody's familiar with these windows, you'll have a little gate on the window. Okay, the gate on the window is locked from the outside, so nobody can crawl up your fire escape, crawl into your apartment from the outside. Some tenants don't feel comfortable with that, and they feel that they need to lock the gate from the inside. We emphasize this all the time, that is not something that you should be doing. In terms of, in case of a fire in your apartment or you have to get out in a hurry, trying to mess around finding a key to that window, to that lock, is not as easy as you think it's going to be, okay? And we emphasize that those gates should not be locked from the inside at all. The window should be clear at all times in case you do need to get out. If these windows were not blocked, if these windows were not locked, the gates were not locked, I think a lot more tenants would have been able to escape safely. So that is a huge fire message that we want to get out there, aside from closing the door. And again, the Juvenile Fire Setters Program, reaching out to the marshals if you do suspect a child that's curious with fire. Again, I can go on, with kitchen fire safety, with electrical fire safety. I mean, there's so many different topics that we talk about. Smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, that is our #1 thing that we put out there. That is your fail-safe, okay? A lot of people will ask us, well, what if the entire apartment's covered in fire and I can't go anywhere? Do I go in the bathroom? Do I go here? In all honesty, our answer is, if you have a working smoke alarm in your house, that will never happen. You will never get to a point where the entire house or apartment is covered in fire where you cannot escape. Those alarms will go off long before your apartment or your house gets to that point. So we can't emphasize enough the importance of having working smoke and carbon monoxide alarms in your house. Aside from that, I know somebody did mention before the correlation between the heat, the lack of heat in certain buildings and fires. Again, we will look into the relation between the two, but I do know a lot of people, even if they have heat, resort to these space heaters because they want more heat. A lot of things go along with using a space heater. We recommend that you keep 3 feet around the space heater clear of anything combustible at all times. Also, you should be plugging a space heater directly into the wall outlet. You should not be using any kind of extension cord or power strip to use a space heater. Anything that heats or cools an item should be plugged directly into the wall. Okay, no power strips, no surge protectors. Also, along with a space heater, we recommend that you use the space heater in the room that you're using, that you want to warm up while you're awake. Once you go to sleep, that space heater should be turned off and unplugged. Unfortunately, that is not the case. A lot of people like to keep these space heaters running constantly. They want to leave the house and leave the space heater running. They want to go to sleep and the space heater is still running. That is not something that we recommend. The recommendation is that you warm up that room while you're awake. Once you go to sleep, you shut that space heater off. A lot of them do have fail-safes now where if it tips over, they shut down. That is not the case with all of them, and unfortunately some of them will not work properly and will continue to run while they're tipped over. And again, these are causing a lot of fires. So with the space heaters goes a lot of responsibility and a lot of things that we need to keep in mind when we are using a space heater. As far as the main points, I mean, that's what I have. If you want me to continue, I can continue in terms of kitchen fires and electrical fires. I can keep going.
No, I suspect that you could. There's a lot that you can teach us to this morning. So, but I'll let you stop right there. I think those are highlighted points that everyone could learn from. Unfortunately, the tragedy of these recent fires has sort of have brought them to the forefront. But I think it's everyday information that we should have. Before we proceed to the question and answer portion, I think I'm going to just take a second to, thank the FDNY for its bravery and in fighting these fires throughout the city, and also acknowledge the injuries and loss of life of all FDNY employees. So I just wanted to take a minute and thank you for that.
Thank
your
you, sir.
service.
I appreciate it.
I think Victoria had the first question.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is just a clarifying quick question, which is, so surge protectors you're saying are unsafe?
I'm not saying surge protectors are unsafe. What I'm saying is, if it's an item that heats or cools, so let's just say we're talking about a stove, a microwave, a refrigerator, an air conditioner, a space heater, those items should be plugged directly into your outlet. They should not be plugged into a surge protector or a power strip. Surge protectors, power strips are not rated to hold that amount of power for that long a period of time. A surge protector, you're talking about maybe something like where you want to charge your phone, plug in your TV, your computer, stuff like that, a lamp. But any item that heats or cools is generating a lot of power. It is absorbing a lot of power. Also, with the surge protectors, we need to keep in mind that a surge protector is not giving you more power. When you plug a surge protector in, all you're doing is giving yourself more access to the outlet that you're plugging it into. You are not getting more power. You're getting the same amount of power as if you only plugged in two things into that outlet. You're just giving yourself more access to the outlet.
Okay, thank you. My second question is with regard to the Juvenile Fire Setters program. There may be many folks who have questions about or concerns about the implications for ACS or immigration if they were to call attention to their child. Can you alleviate some of those concerns for people or speak to how those issues would be dealt with?
I can't speak on behalf of the fire marshals themselves, but I can tell you that if a call is made in terms of a child related to playing with fire and the concerns with that, the fire marshals are specifically there for that reason. They're not looking for anything else. They're not really able to enforce anything else, even if they wanted to, but their focus is that child, and that is it. They're there to look into this child and to evaluate this child for the possibility of anything serious coming down the road.
And when you say anything serious, can you speak any further to working with ACS, or is that not so?
No, in terms of anything serious down the road, I'm talking more in terms of whether they feel that this child is really a risk in terms of starting a fire or anything like that.
In terms of ACS, the fire marshals, when they do that initial assessment or when they do the outreach for the case, I mean, if there is clear indications that ACS needs to be called or referred, they're already trained to do that in terms of anything having to do with neglect or abuse or anything like that. Our fire marshals already have a direct connection with the ACS program. So,
thank you.
Mr. Lofton, I think you were first.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. First of all, I want to thank the fire department for all the distribution of all the smoke and fire alarms in District 1 and also bringing the smokehouse into District 1. Question related to that fire. You were talking before about the fire rating of a building, and this building was not fire rated, correct?
Not that it's not fire rated. I mean, they're all fire rated. It's just a matter of the type of rating that it is. Yes.
Okay. would the owner be required in that case, if it was not high fire rated, to have an alarm system in a hallway and also sprinkler systems throughout the hallways of a building that is not rated in that manner?
No, I don't believe that that is a requirement at all. That's more a question for fire prevention, but that, from my understanding, that is not a requirement. That alarms in the hallways, sprinklers, are not a requirement.
Really? Mr. Wernick?
Thank you. So, two questions. You talk about closing doors. What about closing windows? Are those issues ever?
We don't see the issue with the closing of the windows as much. Now, it all depends. Again, there's a lot of things that we have to take into account here. The type of building we're talking about, the conditions outside, the conditions inside. When we're talking about closing a window, yes, we recommend that you close your window if you are on the apartment above the fire apartment, let's just say. We have seen numerous times where the fires lapped out of the fire apartment window, came up, and then back into the window above. So we do recommend that you close the window if you do live above. Also, you don't want the smoke coming in, so you want to keep that window closed. In terms of closing the window in the fire apartment itself, it is recommended that that window is closed. But again, if you have a fire in your apartment, the last thing you're worried about is whether your window is closed or open. The first thing you want to do is get out. But we do want to emphasize closing that apartment door. The fire department has changed our tactics somewhat, where we used to open the windows in the fire apartment immediately. What was happening was we were finding out that with the fire apartment door open and the window open in the fire apartment, if there was a great enough wind, the wind was blowtorching this fire out into the hallway, endangering residents as well as burning and unfortunately killing some firefighters in some cases. So we did change our procedures with that, where we will not open that window until there is water on the fire now.
Thank you. And the second question I had is, you talked about like teaching children and really ultimately you're teaching adults too. How do you train, or how do you teach kids to check the door if it's hot? And I know I was taught that a long time ago, but I don't remember.
Right. When we're talking about teaching children to check the door, we always teach them to check the door with the back of their hand. Okay. And you just want to feel the door and see if it's hot. If obviously it's hot to the touch. We always teach them, if you touch the door and you have to pull your hand away immediately, that door is hot to the touch, and we tell them that there is probably fire on the other side. You do not want to use that door. You want to try and find another way out. So that's how we really talk about checking the door for heat. At the same time, if you're not sure, we tell them if they feel it and it's somewhat warm but not really hot to the touch, we always teach everybody to slowly open the door, always keeping your hand on the doorknob itself, just in case there is fire on the other side, you're able to close the door. A lot of times people will open the door and they'll just pull it open and let the door swing. Now, if there's fire on the other side, they're trying to find the door to close it again. So we always teach everybody not to let go of that doorknob, to slowly open the door, see what's happening inside, check it first. If it looks clear, then go. If it's not, you're able to close that door and again find another way out.
So you check the doorknob or the door itself?
You check the door itself. Obviously, when if the door is not hot to the touch, you want to give that doorknob a good feel before you go and grab it, naturally. But other than that, if the doorknob is not hot, you want to keep a grasp on it while you open the door.
Ms. Santiago?
Hi, thank you. I have a few questions. You said if a building is 7 stories, I know this building is exactly 7 stories, so it's not fireproof.
More than 7 stories, correct.
It has to be more than 7 stories to be fireproof.
Correct.
Okay. That means you just get out.
Yes, if it's non-fireproof. If it's less than 7 stories.
No, it is exactly 7 stories, the building. So it would be
non-fireproof. Get out, yes.
Okay. A lot of people use the surge for putting different things to plug in, like you're saying, the outlet. How about electric blankets?
Electric blankets, we teach the same exact thing.
Same thing?
When you're using an electric blanket, we recommend that it's placed on top of the mattress, not in between the mattress and the box spring. Also, that it's not plugged into a surge protector because, again, it is an item that heats. Therefore, it is generating a lot of electricity. So you should be placing it on top of the mattress. And, again, it should be placed on the mattress while you're awake to warm up the bed. Once you go to sleep, that blanket should be shut off and unplugged.
Yeah, I wanted you to say that because I know a lot of people do use the electric blankets.
Yes, they do.
The other thing was fire extinguishers. Do you teach anything about that? Do you give a reduction on them for people who want them? Or?
We do not give a reduction on them, but we do training on fire extinguishers. Again, that is another part of our fire safety presentation that we do. We do teach people how to properly use and inspect their fire extinguishers. We do a whole training session on that as well, yes.
I just know, like my colleague, he was talking about your training children, but adults. Have you ever gone to buildings and actually done on-site building trainings if they requested it?
We do tenant association meetings. If a building will request us, we do come and do presentations in a building itself. But these are all based on requests.
Requests.
Yes.
Thank you.
One thing to note, the OEM partnership that we're mentioning, ideally, if we're going to be working with district managers and communities across the board, that's going to be an opportunity to invite, if you have a listing of tenant association leaders, to come and invite their membership as well, because breakout sessions in terms of teaching certain fire safety habits will be at these seminars or at these presentations. So definitely, that's something to look forward for. And if we're able to target tenant leaders and tenant associations on a greater scale, that would be the time right there. So,
thank you.
And if I may add, I just want to mention that we do actually presentation on emergency preparedness. We do over 1,000 of this presentation a year. So you're more than welcome to request these presentations as well. They're catered to different audience. We even have an outreach coordinator just catering for kids. We even have our own superhero to kind of attract the attention of the kids and make sure that they're also learning about emergency preparedness, because we know once we teach the kids, they take it back home and they really put pressure on the parents to actually create an emergency plan. In addition to that, with the Notify NYC, with the notifications, I just forgot to mention that coming up soon, hopefully next year, our agency is going to be capable to translate any messages into the 10 main languages spoken in the city of New York. So coming up soon, if English is not your first language or the language spoken at home, if you want to register to Notify NYC, hopefully by the next year, we're going to be able to translate that message initially as it's coming out into all the languages as well. And forgot to mention one more thing. Don't forget that we have our borough called with community boards. It's something uniquely for community boards. I know we do it with all the different boroughs as well when we join you with all the boroughs, but it's important because this is where our agency talk to you directly about what are we doing, what are the new things in the agency and what are the resources that we have available for community boards. Again, it's something uniquely for community boards and the board president's office. We usually invite them as well. And this is an opportunity to talk about what we can do, how we can collaborate. I'm sure that initiative is going to come up in the call as well. It's going to be on the 22nd or the 23rd for your borough. I'm not sure what day, but I'll send the invitation shortly to you.
Thank you.
Matt.
Hello. I just wanted the number for, you have mentioned that there's an FDNY Smart website to do the referrals, but what is the number?
technically for fire safety education, it's 718-281-3870. However, just because with the urgency of district managers, and we do want to reply because the office does get it gets inundated with several requests, I would say the best way for district managers or elected offices, please contact community affairs. We have the respective borough liaisons. We do work directly with the fire safety education unit in terms of getting these referrals. I tend to joke with the lieutenant all the time. We're always working day and night 24/7 in terms of really making these presentations happen. So pretty much the number I gave you or community affairs at fdny.nyc.gov.
Would you repeat that number again? Yeah, community affairs.
For the fire safety education unit, 718-281-3870. However, like I mentioned, if in need that you want one specifically through the community board, contact community affairs at communityaffairs@fdny.nyc.gov, or you can contact the community affairs office at 718-999-1436.
And with us, if you would like a presentation, you can either email intergovernmental affairs at intergov@oem.nyc.gov, or you can put a request to 311 and we will come anywhere. We will get the presentation in any languages that we have capability to do so.
In terms of just speaking on children and amplifying outreach for children, beyond what we're doing with OEM, we are going to be hosting our citywide open house this year. Once again, this would be our 4th annual, where all our firehouses and EMS stations are open to the public during specific times. Most likely this year we're aiming to have it earlier. opposed to the May timeline, and we're actually working right now with DYCD to get better coverage to ensure that children on a citywide level are going to respective firehouses and EMS stations. We'll keep everyone posted of once the date is determined. And in addition, we will be selecting locations to host our annual block parties, which have been a success in terms of overall promotion of fire safety, life safety education, and just community relations with the local respective firehouse or EMS station. Those dates are to be determined, but they're typically one per borough. And in the Bronx, we've had quite a turnout, and with the support, of course, of local elected leaders and the community board in terms of really promoting and getting constituents out. So.
Just want to make one more statement. I'm sorry.
Sure, Ms. Santiago.
I'm sorry. The mobile unit that you have that you teach children, that can also be used for adults. Is there a limit on how many adults we can have come to something like that if we have your mobile unit brought like to a senior center in our board or to the office?
It is used for adults as well, and there's no limit. Usually we only put about 5 people in at a time, otherwise you really lose part of the experience.
Right.
So we usually do 5 at a time, but again, it depends, we'll just keep the rest of the people outside waiting, and once those 5 are complete, we'll put the next 5 in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any further questions? Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you for coming and joining us, and again, thank you for your service.
Mobile unit
for having us.
come to the board office so the board members know.
So I just want to wrap up a little on some I guess housekeeping. Go over some of the things some upcoming events. The Borough President's Office is looking forward to working in collaboration with Trinity Baptist Church, where the Reverend Naomi Taylor Lloyd is the senior pastor. And we'll be hosting a Martin Luther King community interfaith service, of course, celebrating the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this will be held 10 a.m. sharp, the flyer says. So that's wonderful. Monday, January the 15th. Trinity Baptist Church, 808 East 224th Street, of course in the Bronx, between Barnes and Bronxwood Avenues. And again, that is January 15th. And then we're going to be hosting Bronx housing enrollment events on Wednesdays, several Wednesdays monthly. In 2008, and at the Borough President's Office, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., and that's going to be Wednesday, January 24th, February 21st, March 21st, April 18th, May 23rd, and June 23rd. And this enrollment event is a highlight for the STAR program, E-STAR, and various other housing homeowners and tenants services. And again, we just have one more. So the Bronx Borough President's Office wants you to be a part of our community, and we will be what are we doing here? So, oh yes, if you're watching, then you're very much aware of our borough managers and the functions of community boards, and we want you to be involved, and we want you to file applications, and the deadline for those applications are February 19th, 2018. And there is a request also for 16 and 7-year-olds who can apply for positions on the community boards. So that is our housekeeping. We have a hand. Yes.
We're going to leave some hard copies of the child's fire safety tips on the table out there. So if people want to take hard copies for their offices or whatever, they can just grab whatever they need.
Thank you so much.
And electronic copies, if needed, we could provide it in multiple languages with that and any of the major publications that the lieutenant was mentioning for distribution. So.
Thank you, everyone. It was my first meeting. How did I do? 2000. Let's make it a great 2018.